4 minutes after 10. It's a bit of a funny old morning. There's currently a verdict being delivered in the Court of Appeal on the government's Rwanda policy. Judges ruling on whether or not it is legal or illegal. We'll have to keep an eye on that as it unfolds. We have a story that has just broken about the MPs who, the Privileges Committee has come as close as it can to concluding that they have been in contempt of Parliament, although what happens next, the dotting of the I's and the crossing of the T's, falls to Parliament itself. Consultants going on strike in the NHS is a story that is inevitably gathering pace. And of course, the water companies could crash while we're on air. You could have news being reported today of the government essentially stepping in to take over Thames Water and possibly other water suppliers at enormous cost to the taxpayer. I got haunted yesterday by some of those numbers. It's nothing worse than being haunted by numbers. And the key ones being the amount that is currently owed versus the amount that has been paid out since companies with no debt at all were privatised by Margaret Thatcher and, of course, her government. And it is her successors in government. It is the modern iteration of the Tory party that we're going to talk about first today. Not, of course, for the first time. But I mentioned Margaret Thatcher. I mean, by accident, to be honest with you. I wasn't planning on drawing any parallels at all when I referred to her in the context of privatisation. But it did occur to me that, love or loathe her policies, there was, when I was growing up, an expectation of probity in Parliament. It was not that difficult, for example, to find yourself in a position as a minister, especially, where your conduct would demand your resignation. I mean, off the top of my head, we had a Secretary of State, I think, for Defence, who resigned when the Argentinians arrived in the Falkland Islands. Obviously, it wasn't his fault that had happened, but the buck, if you like, stopped with him. I remember a cabinet minister called Cecil Parkinson resigning because he had impregnated his secretary. A remarkable memory, really, when you reflect even briefly upon the checkered personal life and paternity history of the last Prime Minister but one. I always forget Liz Truss, possibly because we're trying so hard to forget Liz Truss. Even relatively recently, Amber Rudd, I got a mental blockage on that. Have I ever told you? I got Amber Rudd and Amber Heard completely mixed up in my brain. So every single time I say the word Amber, I just have to do a little bit of a tango in my noggin to decide whether or not it is the ex-wife of the actress and ex-wife of Johnny Depp, or whether it's the former Home Secretary. So I say Amber Rudd essentially resigned over mistakes that had been made by other people. I mention that because that wasn't very long ago. Then, of course, you have other ministerial resignations, which are pub quizzes. I can't quite remember did Edwina Currie ever resign over the salmonella thing? David Mellor eventually went over holidays, I think, rather than Chelsea shirts. I can't remember. But as I was growing up, there were examples of parameters of probity. Obviously, the offence is getting caught. The offence is always getting caught. It is not the actual commission that is the offence. It is the capture. It is getting caught that gets you into bother. But there was a sort of playing field upon which everybody at least agreed upon what the rules were, right? You might disagree about how severe the punishment should be if you broke those rules. There'd be a little bit of bias, a little bit of footballification. So if it was one of your team that broke the rules, you would probably have a slightly different response from that, which you would have if it was one of the opposition team, one of the opposing team that broke the rules. But there would not really be much dispute about what the rules were and where breaking them would lead. And then along came Brexit. Along came a campaign of such undiluted dishonesty and division that it would take generations, possibly, for fractures and fissures to be repaired. And the consequence of keeping Brexit alive, keeping it inflated, albeit temporarily, and the consequences of propelling people like Boris Johnson to the very pinnacle of power in this country, demanded the promotion of deeply unsuitable, wholly inadequate, dishonest, and profoundly stupid politicians. That is, I think, now moving from the realms of opinion into the realms of simply counting. Some of the politicians promoted because they helped Boris Johnson sustain the myth of his own suitability for high office and the lies of Brexit. Some of those politicians that were promoted into places they should never even have been allowed to pop in with a feather duster and clean around the cornicing were spectacular. And it is not a coincidence that many of those politicians promoted into positions millions upon millions of miles beyond their capabilities or qualifications are today named and shamed by the Privileges Committee report into the impugning of the integrity of the committee and its members itself, and worse, the attempt to lobby or intimidate those members or to encourage others to do so. And that really is the point. There was no effort, no real attempt to address the substance of the issues. I told you there'd be breaking news. The government's Rwanda policy has been ruled unlawful by the Court of Appeal. That is, I don't know. Hand on heart, I don't know whether Suella Braverman will be weeping into her cornflakes this morning or whether she'll be absolutely delighted, because the whole point of the policy since its very inception has been to add lawyers to the list of people upon whom they can launch vicious and unprompted, unmerited attacks in the hope of undermining the very mechanics of our democracy. So in some ways, the Rwanda story leaches into the story about the Privileges Committee, because they'll be coming after judges now, again, in much the same way that rhetoric of lefty lawyers. You know, the Home Office was warned in Priti Patel's day to stop using that sort of rhetoric because lawyers were actually getting attacked verbally and I think in at least one case physically. Do you think they paid the blindest bit of attention to those pleas from, I think it was the Bar Council or the Law Society or quite possibly both? Of course not. So the UK Rwanda asylum plan has been ruled as unlawful. We'll have a look at what that means shortly. Back to the Privileges Committee, back to the promotion of wholly unsuitable politicians. I think in the case of Nadine Dorries, a woman found to have lied about me, so I can say that with absolute confidence, libelled members of the press, a woman who boasts about trying to get journalists sacked, who makes spurious bullying allegations against her own colleagues which fall apart under scrutiny because of her own history of vile and abusive behaviour on the internet, a troll by any other name, who somehow ended up in charge briefly of the online harms bill. She sought to attack Channel 4, which of course this week did a bang-up job on pointing out the obscenity of Boris Johnson's relationships with the family of a Russian spy. Punishment, shoot the messenger. So this list of politicians is, if you like, the proof isn't quite the right word. It's the sort of ultimate illustration of just how much damage has been done to things that were once sacrosanct. Nadine Dorries on Twitter. Zach Goldsmith on Twitter. Mark Jenkinson on Twitter. Michael Fabricant on Twitter. Brendan Clark-Smith on Twitter. Nadine Dorries on Talk TV. And it goes on. Jacob Rees-Mogg on the BBC. Andrea Jenkins on Twitter. Jacob Rees-Mogg on GBBs. Priti Patel on GBBs. Nadine Dorries on Twitter. Nadine Dorries in the Daily Mail. Pouring scorn, not on the process, but on the individuals involved in this judgment. And I'll tell you again, a Conservative majority Select Committee, I beg your pardon, a Conservative Majority Privileges Committee. A Conservative Majority Privileges Committee coming under attack in, frankly, vile terms from Conservative politicians, every single one of whom has been preferred or promoted by the godfather of all of this corruption, Boris Johnson. Nadine Dorries thought she was going to get a seat in the House of Lords. Even more improbably, she got a seat at the cabinet table. Andrea Jenkins has been elevated to damehood. Jacob Rees-Mogg, of course, has been given a knighthood after being elevated to the cabinet table. Possibly out of all of them, the one least fitted. Well, between him and Dorries, it would be a prize fight, wouldn't it? And the rest of them as well, similarly, Except Brendan Clark-Smith. I think he just did it all for a biscuit. Did Michael Fabricant get a knighthood? I can't remember. So there it is. If you don't fully understand the scale of the offence, it is about MPs impugning the integrity of the committee and its members. It is about attempts to lobby or intimidate members of the Privileges Committee. What this is about, very simply, it is about politicians, conservative politicians, deploying the tactics of the Daily Mail or the Murdoch press to attack politicians, including Conservative colleagues, on a committee designed and dedicated to policing and scrutinising the behaviour of politicians, in this case, a former Prime Minister. It's about as damning an indictment of where we've ended up as a parliamentary democracy as it's possible to conceive. Conservative MPs not even aware of how egregious their behaviour is, too thick or too bent to acknowledge or understand how outrageous their behaviour is, queuing up to use the language, if you like, of McCarthyism or 1930s Germany or whatever it is you prefer to use, talking about witch hunts, talking about kangaroo courts, impugning the integrity of the individuals and the institution without having anything substantive to say to critique their actual findings, to critique the actual findings of the report, of the committee. It's mad. So here's the question, right? Here's the question. The number you need is 0345 6060 973. Okay? And here is the question. I should have thought of that, shouldn't I, really, before I started bigging it up in quite a portentous way like that. I suddenly said, here is the question. I thought, you haven't come up with one yet, mate. What are you doing? You should have gone to a break early. But here is possibly the question. I was going to ask about Trump. I was going to say, is this have we gone full Trump now? But I'm not. I'm going to ask you to explain to people listening to this who possibly don't understand how serious it is, how egregious it is. Can you explain how big a deal this is? But crucially as well, so you know how this programme worked. How did this happen? So let's work on the principle. And this is quite a reach, all right? This is quite a reach. But here are the names. Nadine Dorries, Zach Goldsmith, Mark Jenkinson, Michael Fabricant, Brendan Clark-Smith, and then I think Priti Patel, let's get this absolutely right, Jacob Rees-Mogg and Andrea Jenkins. Let's I don't want to say pretend, but let us presume that they were once honourable. Okay, let us presume that they went into Parliament, they went into politics with good intentions. Let us at least presume, if that's too much to ask, let us at least presume that they did once understand the importance of, well, everything really, from the ministerial standards which Jacob Rees-Mogg tried to rip up, but the proroguing, not proroguing Parliament unlawfully, which of course Jacob Rees-Mogg was a key ringleader of, not misleading the Queen, which of course Jacob Rees-Mogg stands accused of doing. But let us just presume that they once abided by the protocols and standards that hold parliamentary democracy together, okay? This is important, otherwise the phone-in's not going to work. Let's presume that all of them once abided by and understood the importance of parliamentary protocol, of parliamentary standards, okay? They once understood that. Go back 6 years, go back 10 years, go back 20. Go back however far you want, but imagine a place where Jacob Rees-Mogg, Andrea Jenkins, Priti Patel, Nadine Dorries, Zach Goldsmith, Mark Jenkinson, Michael Fabricant and Brendan Clark-Smith, let's call them the Diabolical Eight. Imagine a place where they understood how important this stuff is, and tell me what you think happened to them. How did they end up in such abject disgrace? You might have a favourite. You might think, God, the rest of them I completely understand, but I'm surprised that Goldsmith, in which case I'd suggest you weren't paying much attention to his racist mayoral campaign a few years ago. But what happened? How could 8 MPs end up so completely corrupted by loyalty to Boris Johnson that they end up impugning the integrity of Parliament itself? What happened? How did their brains get so boiled? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. How did their brains get so boiled? What boiled them to the point where they would impugn and attack the integrity of the parliament they sit in? It's a very important question. I don't know if I can answer it. Luckily, I can insist that you do instead. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Can you do it from memory yet? Can you do? I'm sorry, we're going to. Obviously, it's the hateful 8, not the diabolical 8. Not like me to miss a Quentin Tarantino opportunity. But can you do it from memory yet? Could you do all 8 from memory? Do you think? I reckon I could do 7. Goldsmith, Clark Smith, Dorries Patel, Fabricant, Rees-Mogg, and that funny fella Mark Jenkinson. But there's an 8th one. Who's the 8th one? Clark Smith, Fabricant, Jenkinson. I definitely counted 8, didn't I? Patel. I got Patel. Jenkins, Andrea Jenkins. God, how could anyone forget Andrea Jenkins? Or how could anybody want not to forget Andrea Jenkins? So there they are. If I was in a slightly more mischievous mood, we'd just rank them. We'd just go, who's the worst? Out of these 8 absolute abominations of politicians, which is the worst? But we won't. Instead, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. We'll work on the presumption that they were once decent, honourable members. And we'll ask what happened to them to turn them into people that would attack and impugn the integrity of Parliament itself while waving their little polyester Boris Johnson flags. Liz is in Cricklade. Liz, what happened?
Hello, James.
Hello, Liz.
Well, I think I'm going to focus on Zach Goldsmith, really,
yes,
because
okay.
he was, I think he probably is quite a ringleader.
He was the future once.
Well, he was very clever in making everybody focus on being concerned with the environment. And
yes,
so
I think that was sincere, though. I think even before he was a politician, his closeness to his uncle, who set up the Ecologist magazine. I don't think that was a front or a facade.
Well, it is possible to have both positions.
Of course.
Speaking from a farming perspective,
yeah, okay.
That sometimes that was, the sort of blame culture, the scapegoating within that ideology was not helpful, because we need the countryside to feed the people and the wildlife and everything else. So sometimes it was very scapegoaty and blaming farmers for,
Okay, we're getting a bit distracted. My fault. Let me steer you back. What boiled his brain?
Well, I don't think. I think he went into Parliament as a revolutionary. I think he wanted to change the way things are run, and I don't think they agreed with parliamentary sovereignty, because they think it takes too long. All of the things they criticise the EU for are about it taking years to do trade deals.
But this would be quite
scrutiny.
This would be quite a thoughtful position. So we certainly can't apply it to anybody else on the list, can we? No one's ever going to call Nadine Dorries thoughtful. But so you think Zach Goldsmith was undertaking some sort of a transformation, revolution from within?
Well, he hasn't abided by anything democratic, because he lost his seat. And then Boris Johnson, who has left Parliament now in complete disgrace.
Yes.
This man put him into the House of Lords and then put him into the government as an unelected bureaucrat.
He's actually a minister,
or an unelected
so we have the prospect now of a minister being in contempt. But I'm going to focus on, I think you're too sophisticated for my simplistic treatment this morning, but I'm going to drag you back to it. What boiled his brain?
Well,
Boris
I think
Johnson? Proximity to Boris Johnson?
I think it's ideology, James. It comes down to whether you think that there should be
I'm going to disagree with you, possibly for the first time ever.
One person in charge to make quick decisions.
No, because they were constantly claiming to be upholders of parliamentary tradition, and this isn't really about the parliamentary process or the political process. This is about defending the indefensible, ending up watching your hero in the dock, like Mr. Toad in Wind in the Willows. Pop, pop, says Boris Johnson from the dock. And you have a choice. Either you agree with the evidence that is before the court, or you attack the court. Why did Goldsmith, Clark Smith, Dorries Patel, Fabricant, Rees-Mogg, Jenkinson and Jenkins, why did they choose to attack the jury instead of the convicted criminal in the dock? What boiled their brains? Charlie's in Victoria, Australia. Charlie, what boiled their brains?
Mate, I just want to say I'm very happy to speak with you. I've been following you on YouTube for a while.
Top man, thank
you. And I really like you. You're one of the rare journalists that I actually like sort of following.
That's very kind. Thank you. What do you think's happening here?
Mate, I think just from my brief reading, it's I read a fair bit of politics and things, and essentially, mate, the reason can be easily explained that they are far more loyal to their ideology than any system of state or system of government or system of checks and balances. Since Thatcher and Reagan, essentially, and that revolution, that sort of free market, privatise everything kind of ideology, they're sort of soldiers of that.
I think that answer fits a lot of the questions I ask on this programme. I'm not sure it fits this one because there are at least 3 people on this list who would struggle to spell the word ideology, Charlie.
Well, it's not that they pull out a chalkboard and do it like the old communists used to do it, but it's like a lot of governments in the world, especially aligned with the West, have adopted that sort of. The IMF does that. It's a pervasive sort of ideology that sees government rules and regulations, or old school rules and regulations, checks and balances, even classical liberal ideas.
Okay, so the rules shouldn't apply. They might not be anti-rules necessarily, but they think the rules shouldn't apply to them.
That's right, because they as opposed to what's against it, like the old left, the old Labour, the Jeremy Corbyns, who will always sort of put principle of having letting someone else have a go, letting someone else have their views before ideology. It's very ideologically driven, and if it's against the free market, if it's against the investor class.
No, I'll give you. I think we could tick a couple on the list for that analysis, and certainly it answers questions about failure to properly scrutinise and hold to account historically. But in attacking a privileges committee on a very specific question of Boris Johnson's serial dishonesty, I don't know how far down that road the neoliberal critique would take us. I also don't think that some of the names on this list would be able to begin to explain the ideology that others espouse and abide by. I really don't. I mean, I don't want to be unduly rude. I'm very happy being duly rude, but I don't want to be unduly rude. So some of these people are truly as thick as mints, and their relationship with the truth is absolutely semi-detached. Dorries in particular promised to resign with immediate effect, I think 20 days ago, but I can't be sure because we haven't done Dorries Watch yet. But how you can announce you're going to resign with immediate effect and still be there the best part of 3 weeks later is a question for the ages. But the question for today is what boiled their brains, working on the presumption, which Charlie kind of jumped over. He didn't give them the benefit of the doubt. Working on the presumption that they once believed that this stuff matters. Rees-Mogg in particular was a sort of, thought like to style himself as a pocket Erskine May, thought he was some sort of great upholder of parliamentary tradition, drawling in his ludicrous manner about arcane and long-forgotten precedents in Parliament that he'd literally just looked up before he turned up in a studio to give an interview, pretending that he cared passionately, or deeply at least. I don't think he does anything passionately, but he cared deeply about these matters. And then when he's actually given the opportunity to uphold them, he leads an attempt to rip up the rule book after Owen Paterson broke the rules. He leads the unlawful proroguing of Parliament, and today he's found to hold the very foundation stones of parliamentary democracy in complete contempt because he sought to impugn the members of a committee, his own colleagues, to attack them, to use phrases like kangaroo court or witch hunt or whichever ones it was he uses. So use him as an example. He let's say that it's unfair to say he pretended to care. He did once care about such matters, and now he's reached a point where he will absolutely deride them. How did that happen? What changed? What boiled his brain? 0345 6060 973. Thomas Watts is here with your headlines. Couple more for the list. Peter Cruddas, who I think got a peerage after Boris Johnson chose to reject the advice of the Appointments Commission. And Greenhouse. So I think it's Simon Greenhouse. I hesitate to say Lord in the context of these people. They're so utterly undeserving of the gongs that they got. But I think he worked in City Hall with Boris Johnson. So lots of gongs being handed out to allies. Takes away, sadly, my hateful eight nomenclature leaves us with 10 of these characters who care so little for parliamentary democracy that they were prepared to impugn it. Quickly, Robert Peston, ITV's political editor, providing a little bit of helpful context. It has found these Tory MPs and Lords to have engaged in a campaign to undermine its inquiry into whether Boris Johnson lied to Parliament. It recommends that MPs vote to give it the powers, currently enjoyed by the Standards Committee but not the Privileges Committee, to punish such MPs should they transgress in the future. But perhaps more interesting in the short term, any motion to give the committee those powers is, Peston contends, very likely to be amended to insist that Dorries, Patel, Rees-Mogg and the rest of them apologise to MPs in formal Commons statements. Were they to refuse, then they would be in contempt of the Commons and would presumably be suspended. So a helpful illustration there of how important this is for anybody quite understandably struggling to keep up with the importance of it, because it is also unprecedented. But I wouldn't put necessarily Greenhouse or Cruddas on the list of people I'm asking this question about, because I don't think that taking a seat in the House of Lords after the Appointments Commission has warned against it, I don't think that does really speak of somebody who cared particularly about the traditions and protocols of the Houses of Parliament. But the question with the other 8, what happened to turn them into people that could behave with such contempt and potentially, of course, in contempt? Dave's in Hoddesdon. Dave, what do you reckon?
Hi, James. Thanks for taking my call.
You're very
long-time listener, first-time caller, but
Good
I'm
man.
not nervous at all.
That's the spirit.
Because it's only you.
That's it, exactly that. Good Lord, that's it. We've got to run through them all in 30 seconds flat. Where are we this morning? What's going on?
In answer to your question, I think my guess is that these people realised that they could get away with telling lies, that people are not actually interested in the truth. So they... maybe you can track it back to the £250 million for the NHS. When they realised the Brexit lies, actually they could get away with, and then when the nation or the party called Boris Johnson, who is clearly somebody who has a problem with truth-telling, when the party called him to be party leader, and when the country called him to be prime minister, I think those people who might at one point in time have been all over integrity, truth-telling, that sort of thing, they realise actually people don't care. People don't care. And so therefore I think somehow it's on us, if you see what I mean.
I do see. Hang on. I do see what you mean. But speaking of us, we know they were lies. And even if we didn't know they were lies at the time, they've become lies subsequently. And if you don't then disown them, then you are supporting lies. You could say, sorry, I honestly believe there would be £350 million for the NHS, for example. I honestly believe this, that or the other. But I don't think they did, you see. I don't think I mean, it's a bit like Trump. How many of Trump's supporters genuinely think that the last election was rigged?
Yeah.
Quite a few, I think. They genuinely have believed this nonsense. So that makes them not quite victims of a lie, but do you see the difference between believing and amplifying a lie that started somewhere else and sort of starting it yourself?
But are you saying that they started it themselves? Because
I'm saying that I don't know. Goldsmith is probably the one I'd pick on first. I think that there was some decency there. I think he made a terrible mistake during his mayoral campaign by signing up some really, really nasty advisors and going along with their racist suggestions. And you know, he sees himself as some sort of crusader with his efforts to bring in a recall bill. He ended up, I think he was unhappy with what actually happened in the end, but it was certainly a big mission for him at one point. He sort of saw himself as some sort of sanitizing force, and yet here he is now in absolute disgrace. Something happened in that journey between 2015 and 2023.
And I think I would put it down to the fact that it's become clear that we actually don't care about the truth in the way that we perhaps thought that we did.
But then there'd be more of them. There'd be more of them then, wouldn't there? Or maybe there'd be plenty of people who'd nod along.
Well, I think there are plenty of people, because I think with the whole Partygate thing...
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It's only a piece of cake. And the issue is, surely the issue is, once you take away integrity and truth-telling, we've got all manner of problems, because the next time a prime minister, and there will be a next time a prime minister gets on the television and says you've got to stay in your homes, you can't go out, we will all be thinking, gosh, that sounds really serious, but actually I'm pretty sure they don't mean it. I think they mean stay in your homes unless there's a birthday party you need to be at, or a works leaving.
They've lost both moral and political authority. I hope not. I don't think I've got the confidence to challenge you, but a change of air, a change of personnel, a change of government might improve things. Constantly playing past the parcel with the Prime Minister's job among a tiny coterie of Brexit-supporting lunatics is unlikely to affect any particular change in confidence. But I hope you're wrong, but you make an excellent point. Thank you, Dave. Return to this question shortly. But first, I'm in a very felicitous position. In fact, I think it's a testament, Adam Wagner, to your talent as both lawyer and commentator, that you're qualified to help us out on both of the major breaking news stories this morning. You could talk to us about the Privileges Committee's findings about these 10 parliamentarians, and you can, of course, also talk to us about the appeal court's ruling with regard to the question of whether or not Rwanda is a safe country to which for Suella Braverman to deport refugees to. Let's begin with the Rwanda ruling, if we can. How significant is it?
I mean, it's massive, because the government, it's the Rwanda policy is the central plank of the government's attempt to deal with the small boats issue and illegal migration. It's the entire. I mean, that's the whole.
It's it. I mean, it is, isn't it? Exactly. It's lock, stock, and barrel.
It's lock, stock, and barrel because that's the way they say they're going to deter people. And if they can't deter, so it's all interconnected, because they're saying anybody that arrives, this is the new bill that's going through Parliament, anyone that arrives illegally can't be considered under the asylum system. So instead of being considered, they're going to be detained at government expense, and then they're going to be sent to Rwanda. And by being sent to Rwanda, it takes them off the UK's books. They don't have to put them up anymore. And it will discourage people from coming over in the small boats. So it will become a sort of virtuous circle. That's their entire policy. But now that the Court of Appeal has said, in actual fact, they cannot send anyone to Rwanda because Rwanda is not a safe country.
That's the crucial point, because Rwanda is not a safe country.
No. And that's, I mean, it should. I think it should have been pretty obvious, but there it is.
Well, you've preempted my next question there. I mean, what would the government's legal advice? I know I'm inviting you to speculate now, but I mean, how could they have gone so? Well, I suppose. I mean, the High Court found in their favour, didn't they?
I mean, it's so not only did the High Court find in their favour, but this is a majority decision where two very senior Court of Appeal judges, found against the government, but the most senior judge, the Lord Chief Justice, found for the government. So this is very much up in the air. It will go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court could also be split, and it could end up going the government's way. But it's quite. I mean, it's there are some serious deficiencies that the Court of Appeal highlights, the majority highlights about the Rwandan processes. Not least that the judges tend to be influenced or are subject to influence by the government. So it's very, things like that can't just be plastered over, and they can't. There's no sort of. The government will say, well, what they are saying is we know there are deficiencies, but the Rwandan government has told us very clearly that they're dealing with them, and we accept that. And the Court of Appeal has said that's all very well, you can accept that, and we think you've done it on good faith, but we don't think the Rwandan government is up to the job of fixing its asylum system, so it's unsafe.
And stories, of course, emerging since these deals were signed and these checks were handed over of refugees in Rwanda being shot after protesting about their food conditions.
And one of the interesting things that people have been saying all along is this was tried. This exact policy was tried by Israel about 10 years ago, and all that happened is it failed, completely failed as a policy, because the refugees got there and they left, or they were discriminated against. And what the Court of Appeal has said, unlike the High Court, is that should be taken into account as part of the overall picture of whether Rwanda is a safe country. And how could you not take into account the fact that this exact policy has been tried and failed in another country?
Remarkable, really. What will the timescale be, Adam? When might the Supreme Court begin its pontifications?
Well, the government's got till next week to appeal, to seek permission to appeal,
Which
which I'm
which
sure
it certainly will.
which will be granted. Yeah, I've no doubt it'll be granted. And then the Supreme Court, I suspect, will hear it in the autumn. At the earliest. I mean, they're not
Okay.
going to hear it over the summer. They'll hear it. The earliest they'll hear it is in the early autumn, I suspect. And then there could be judgment, by early next year. But that's on a sort of very quick timetable.
Oh, really?
So
The likelihood of anybody being, for people who dream of such things, like the Home Secretary, of course, by her own account, for people who dream of such things, the likelihood of it happening this year is now nil?
I suspect so. I mean, my position. I've always thought that the likelihood of anybody ever going through Rwanda
Of course.
is pretty low.
But there was a theoretical
because-
possibility previously,
Yeah,
and that is
I just
now on hold
it just-
until the judgment from the Supreme Court drops.
I'd be surprised if anybody ever gets sent to Rwanda. But it's possible. But you're right, it won't. It's very unlikely to happen this year because at the moment it would be unlawful to send them to Rwanda.
Yes, and so to the Privileges Committee, and I mean it. It's a testament to your professionalism and expertise that you're equally at home commenting on what we have heard from them this morning. What happens next? Do you know that?
Yes, so the Privileges Committee have said they've released a report saying this is the position in the law of Parliament that certain elements of behaviour can be a contempt, and particularly abusing, to sum it up, abusing MPs, abusing other MPs for doing their job, or encouraging others to abuse them. And they've batted it back to Parliament. So they've said, this is our report. What we want you to do is agree with the report, sort of vote on the report, and then decide, if you do vote on the report, what you're going to do about it. And they've left dangling the possibility. They haven't recommended any sanctions. They've just said it's possible that this is contempt and you should consider that. And they've also said that in terms of the people and the Lords, so Lord Cruddas and Lord Goldsmith and Greenhouse, that should be communicated to the Lords, because the House of Commons can't discipline people in the Lords. It has to be done by the Lords.
And crucially, for people just catching up, it's the criticism of the individuals and the institution rather than questioning the evidence. There is freedom to be critical of a committee like this. That is a fundamental freedom, but there are protocols and rules in place in parliamentary terms that should forbid you from going in hard on the integrity of the individuals involved or the institution of the committee.
Yeah, well, it's the difference between saying I disagree with this part of the report, and saying I think the person who wrote, or the people who wrote the report, are corrupt.
Yes.
Without giving any evidence of that, and that is, I think that's the difference between the different kinds of criticism, because you should absolutely be able to, MPs should be able to criticise the findings of reports. I mean that's their job in a way.
Of course.
Just because they're parliament, they're done by colleagues, doesn't mean they're immune to criticism. And obviously, there's a huge amount of politics going on, regardless of no bit of Parliament is immune to politics. So they should also be able to say this is this is potentially partly political. But what I do think there is a line. What the Privileges Committee is saying is there is a line. Eventually, there will be a line that's crossed beyond sort of legitimate free speech and into something which is abusive towards MPs and stops them being able to do their jobs.
And it is the deployment of phrases like kangaroo court and witch hunt that pushes them into that position of alleging corruption. They're well understood figures of speech.
If they had evidence that it was a kangaroo court or corrupt, that would be different. But it's the unevidenced allegations that I think are the problem here, that they're and you see it with Trump, you see it with in other political situations. It's the sort of going for the man, not the ball, and nobody seems to have gone for the ball. None of these MPs seem to have identified any findings that they say are wrong or that they say are unjustified. They've just said, apart from the level of sanction, but they don't really explain that either. So I think there's a reasonable case for Parliament doing something about it, because they'll all be worried about what happens when they're on a committee which is having to decide on a controversial issue. Should they encourage, but by not disciplining or not disparaging what's happened, they'll end up encouraging this kind of behaviour in future.
Adam Wagner, barrister at Doughty Street Chambers, thank you as always. I suppose you were a bog-off today, Adam, were you? You were a buy one, get one free on that, which is a bit of a...
I was about to say I was a buy one, get one free. It's a lucky situation.
But we're doubly grateful. We're doubly grateful. It is 10:49. It is 10:53 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the Tainted 10, perhaps want of a better name, continue to interest us. Zach Goldsmith, Brendan Clark-Smith, Nadine Dorries, Priti Patel, Michael Fabricant, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Mark Jenkinson, Andrea Jenkins, Simon Greenhalgh, Peter Cruddas, all named in the Privileges Committee report published this morning into attempts to impugn, undermine the inquiry into Boris Johnson's serial lying to the House of Commons. And as Adam Wagner, the barrister, just perfectly pointed out to us, that the point is that if you're going to use a phrase like kangaroo court or indeed witch hunt, which is in and of itself an allegation of corruption directed at known and named individuals, then you need evidence. You need to be able to point to something and say, that is proof that this was an unfair process. That is proof that this was a corrupt committee. And they have no proof because there is no evidence, because it isn't. Which makes it really, really, really horrible behaviour. Really horrible behaviour. 10:54 is the time. Nadia is in Portsmouth. Nadia, what happened to these people? If anything, maybe I've been too generous and pretending or presuming that they would once have been outraged by the kind of conduct that they're now engaging in is too kind. But anyway, what did you want to say?
Hello, James.
Hello.
I sense that you've got a group of people here whose unifying characteristic is their greed for power and their ability to serve themselves and to do whatever it takes to advance themselves, whatever situation they find themselves in. I think they're supreme opportunists. When your dad's written the book on disaster capitalism, you've got a head start on everybody else.
Yes.
And that they found themselves, if you like, in the perfect storm, and at the same time perpetuating that perfect storm by a toxic environment within the House of Commons where there appear to be zero consequences for when you behave badly. So
and if you did get caught and consequences, up pop Jacob Rees-Mogg to try and rewrite the whole rule book to get you off the hook.
Absolutely. You're kind of writing the script yourself as you go along,
yes.
And you're finding, sort of with all the principles of self-efficacy, that once you're successful once at something, you'll give it another go and try a little bit harder the next time. And eventually, I guess, time does catch up with everyone if you wait long enough. And when something comes home to roost, then, you are in a position where you're not going to support the people who are going to show you and hold you to account for the way you've behaved. But disappointingly, when we look at what the Privileges Committee have released, is that they won't take that extra step and say, these are the consequences. I mean, I spent my whole life, I'm retired now, but I spent my whole life working as a nurse in the NHS.
Right.
And we had a code of conduct. We have a nursing code of conduct. And there are consequences for stepping outside of that, and they're usually pretty dire, that involve you losing your job and your registration.
Yes.
There are ways of behaving, and it's not just practical things. It's about a moral code as well, and the sort of things that you do and that you don't do that are right and wrong.
This is beautiful, this analysis, because you're describing... Because, I was beginning to think before you came on that finding a thread that bound them all 10 of them, would be impossible. They've all acted egregiously for different reasons. You might be able to knit 3 of them together, or 5, but all 10. But actually, if you look at what they have in common, most obviously it would be an almost fetishistic admiration of Boris Johnson and a blind support for the idiocy of Brexit. So if you take those 2 building blocks, what you assemble is a cohort of people who have been shown that actions have no consequence, that support for terrible people, stupid ideas and blatant lies have no consequences. So the idea that Parliament would hold them to account or provide them with checks and balances. They've ridden roughshod over that. When Parliament looked like it might, they prorogued it unlawfully. They have no respect. They have no reverence for these institutions, these traditions, or these protocols. They've got absolutely nothing to fear from the media because although Murdoch seems to have turned off the Boris Johnson fan club, the Mail is still leading the line on that. And none of these people, none of these 10 are going to have mugshots in tomorrow's newspapers under headlines saying enemies of the people or almost looking like targets. So the media aren't going to do it. And I guess the public is so divided that they're not going to be held to account by the public either, because you've still got plenty of people over there cheering them along.
Absolutely, and one of the hardest things to do in life is to admit when you've been hoodwinked and you've got it wrong. Nobody likes that. You know, if you have been, I don't know, gaslit is the term
popular
of the mot du jour, isn't
yes,
it? But
it is.
you know, if that's how you're feeling, I think it engenders in some people a sense of deep shame that they've been taken for a ride, and no one wants to sort of put their hands up and say, "Yep, I was completely, kippered." It really, it's very uncomfortable.
That's the counterintuitive bit as well, isn't it? Because theoretically, you would think the more obvious Boris Johnson's depravity becomes, the more undeniable his disgusting character and conduct becomes, the more likely you would be to step down and admit that you'd made a terrible mistake. But actually, the opposite is true. The more because the mountain from which you climb down is getting higher every day.
Yeah, and I've got a wide-ranging group of friends, and some of them have been supportive, of what the government's been doing, and my constant sort of mantra to them is, these people are not your friends. Boris Johnson is not your mate. He wouldn't put you out if you were on fire, if you get my drift.
And he wouldn't do it for this lot either. He might try and put them in the House of Lords or throw them a knighthood, but if push really came to shove...
do you know what? I've been re-watching The Thick of It, and it's basically a documentary now. It's gone.
It always was.
You could rebrand it Panorama and just put it on as a documentary right now.
Yes.
The only difference is that Malcolm Tucker would end up in the House of Lords with a peerage.
Yes.
Because, he wouldn't be walking away at the end hanging his head after an inquiry. He'd be rubbing a gong or something like that. But it's just, it's unbelievable. I sometimes do wake up and feel as if I'm on another planet, and I'm genuinely grateful to you ranting so I don't have to some days.
Yeah, I've got you back, Nadia, don't you worry. But of course it's two-way traffic. I'd be going crackers as well if it wasn't for the outlet that we can share every morning between 10 and 1. And speaking of him not putting you out if you were on fire, Dorrie's, of course, still processing the knowledge that he worked harder to get the son of a KGB spy into the House of Lords for as yet undisclosed and largely unknown reasons than he did to get her, despite all of her dedication and devotion. It was the KGB boy who got the seat in the House of Lords and not the girl who went to school without any shoes on. Well, borrowed shoes, was it? Was that the claim? I forget. Anyway, it's gone 11 o'clock. Probably turn our attention to the Rwanda story next, given that is another huge kick in the proverbials for... I almost forgot whose government it was now. Rishi Sunak's this week. It's one of those days, isn't it? 4 minutes after 11. You've got the list of these politicians who've behaved absolutely abominably, and it's almost the top 10 politicians that we talk about most on the James O'Brien show. And then, of course, the Rwanda story dropped just after we came on air as well, and it turns out to be everything that we told you it was, everything that you told me it was, everything that we thought it was. I think what's particularly interesting here, I think they've been done by their own rhetoric, because the stuff that people didn't understand was always going to be the stuff that rose to the top during the proper legal scrutiny. So just some things. And listen, I hope you're still tuning into this show, even if you want to deport everybody back to where their great-great-great-great-grandfather came from, because if you're still there, then there's still a chance we can rescue you. But regardless of where you sit on the question of deporting people, what people believed and what was actually being proposed by the government were, well, almost Brexit-like in their multifariousness. You know how there were 17, it turns out there were 17.5 million different types of Brexit. And no one yet can tell you what the right one was, but everybody's adamant that whichever one they've got is the wrong one. That is pretty similar here, because I remember Ian Duncan Smith being told during a live broadcast interview that this would involve genuine refugees being deported to Rwanda while their application was processed, at the end of which, when they were found to be genuine refugees, they would have to stay in Rwanda. So he's accepted an invitation to come on the telly or the radio to defend the policy and has it explained to him live on air. And he's shocked. I'm pretty sure it was him. Didn't realise that even if you could have the strongest imaginable case for asylum, right? This is the point that I did my best to explain to you. You could have the strongest imaginable case for asylum. You could literally prove, you could bring with you a Taliban hit list with your photograph on the top of it, right? And it could be checked. They could do a full CSI on it, and they would come back and say, no, it's true. This fella is public enemy number one in Afghanistan, and the Taliban have put a $1 million bounty on his head. If he goes back to Afghanistan, he'll be dead before he gets off the plane. You could turn up in Dover with that in your pocket, and three things would happen to you. Number one, you'd be called illegal by these ghouls and vampires. Number two, you'd be carted off to a very, very, very primitive accommodation, which the right-wing media would continue to describe as if it were a five-star hotel. And then number three, under Suella Braverman's dream, you could be put on a plane and deported to Rwanda while your I am at the top of the Taliban hit list claim was examined. Now, they examine the claim that you are public enemy number one in Afghanistan and you're the top of the Taliban's hit list, and they come back and they say, flipping heck, it's true. This fella is absolutely going to be dead before he even gets off the plane if they fly him back to Kabul. He's currently in Rwanda. So they say, great news. We've accepted your application. You're a bona fide asylum seeker. We're granting you asylum. You are a refugee. You are at the top of the Taliban's hit list, and you are staying in Rwanda for the rest of your life. That's the dream. That's what she wants to do. Now, if you are comfortable with the idea of deporting refugees to third countries, then I hope that I can break you down into two camps. There are people who are comfortable with deporting refugees to third countries as long as it's safe. And then there are people who are comfortable with the idea of deporting refugees to countries that aren't even safe. And you're the people that would put this fella on the plane back to Afghanistan. And I imagine you'll be on Twitter in 10 minutes boasting about it and reveling in this kind of base cruelty. But that was misunderstanding number one. It wasn't just going to be people whose applications failed that were sent to Rwanda. God knows what happens to them. I think they stay there as well. But even the most deserving refugee or asylum applicant imaginable would be stuck in Rwanda for the rest of their life. And then you come to the question, and this is absolutely crucial, you come to the question of whether or not Rwanda is a safe place to send them. And the judges have decided, on a majority, 2-1 judgment, they have decided that it's not safe. It is therefore unlawful. So it's got nothing to do with politics. It's got nothing to do with the principle of deportation or offshore application processing. It's got nothing to do with any of these things. The finding is that the policy is unlawful because the destination is unsafe. And that is it. I don't know how the hell it's going to be reported tomorrow. I don't know whether Paul Dacre will get out his Enemies of the People front page and just change the photographs. They even referred to the sexuality of one of the judges after the Brexit Enemies of the People front page. But the truth will probably be twisted a bit, and the most obvious place to twist the truth is right there. It's got nothing to do with politics. It's got nothing to do with policy. It's got everything to do with the safety or otherwise of Rwanda. And because Rwanda is not safe, it would be unlawful to send people there. 10 minutes after 11 is the time. Zoe Gardner is a migrant rights campaigner who has helped us through these matters in the past and will no doubt help us again. This is about as good as you could have hoped for, Zoe, on both a professional and I suspect a personal level.
Hi, James.
Hello.
Yeah, I am thrilled to see this result today. My heart goes out to all the refugees who are being kept in horrific conditions by this government, who will have heard this news, who will have had such a weight lifted from their shoulders, hope restored that their human rights will be respected, that they may be offered a welcome and safety in this country. Just such congratulations to the lawyers, to UNHCR and Asylum Aid, the groups that represented this case in court. Really such wonderful news. And I really hope that the government won't pursue an appeal, that they'll take this for what it is, a clear ruling that Rwanda is not a safe country and that their policy of removals must change.
I think that's a bit optimistic, isn't it?
Yeah, I bet I can predict word for word what Suella Braverman is going to say in Parliament later on.
Go on.
She'll be deeply disappointed, but she'll be pursuing an appeal and she'll probably blame,
Are we sure about this? Because I wonder, I don't know if you're comfortable being tempted onto this sort of territory by me, so tell me to clear off if you're not. But I've wondered from the start whether the fight is more important than the flight, if you see what I mean. Whether the opportunity now to demonise lawyers. We know that Priti Patel was warned in terms to stop demonising, quotes, lefty lawyers, end quotes, because it was opening up the profession to violence, threats, and in at least one case, terrorism. And yet they persisted. They almost seem to relish the opportunity to paint targets on other people's backs.
I'm so sorry if you're getting background noise.
No, we're not.
My name is good.
That's
because
fine. What
my
are they
neighbours
doing?
started drilling.
Oh, brilliant. No, I can't hear that at all.
Okay, well, good. Yeah, no, I do agree that that it is about the fight for the papers, for the story, because that's the only way that their failed policy will be of any use to them at the next election. If they can say that they've been held back by the courts and that, in fact, we need to take the next step, which is potentially, from their perspective, to leave the international conventions on human rights that prevent people from being deported to face torture and death.
Or they could find a safe country to send people to, which would be suboptimal from the humanitarian point of view, but legal.
Yes, but as we've seen, I mean, this is actually not the first time that governments have tried to send people to a different country to the one they've come from. It's not a new idea. It's the first time it's got this far. And the reason for that is that most countries are not very keen on the idea of accepting whoever we don't want, who aren't their nationals. And so you have to, in this case, obviously, our massive economic inequality has been leveraged against the Rwandan government. And a deal has been struck, but it isn't an easy thing to achieve. And that's why, obviously, across Europe, where they have systems and legal systems for allocating responsibility for processing asylum claims between them, it's an extremely contentious area of law as well. And lots of issues with countries trying to shift the responsibility between each other as well. It's not an easy thing to achieve. So if Rwanda goes down the pan as an option, then I think the government will be left with very few options to make its vile removal policies operational at all.
And as you suggest, the ultimate destination may be an assault upon the International Convention on Human Rights. What sort of countries are not signatories to that? Has anyone ever left it before of their own volition? Has any country ever left it before?
Don't think any country's ever left it, no. So in terms of the European Convention on Human Rights, that covers every European country, including outside of the EU.
Yes.
So well, actually, I'm wrong. Sorry, Russia has left.
Do you know, that wasn't a leading question. I'd forgotten as well. But so Vladimir Putin's Russia.
No. So we'd be following Putin out of the jurisdiction.
I think they were thrown out. Was that voluntary or compulsory? I can't remember. But that's the company we would be keeping.
That is the company we'd be keeping. Belarus also never been a member. Other than that, everybody is. And everybody is held to this standard of protection of basic fundamental rights for all human beings. And that's what's really important. What the government's trying to do here is to create categories of human beings who are not subject to the protection of human rights law. And that is fundamentally wrong and a threat to all of us. And
it's quite a good week all round for you, really, with the Bill of Rights being kicked into the bin as well. Dominic Raab's legacy there, but sort of covered in old banana peels and empty ice cream wrappers now, alongside all the other detritus. But finally, Zoe, the people you work with and the people that you advocate for, just remind us what they want. Just remind us why they come here.
Well, we're talking about people who are coming from some of the most dangerous countries on earth. People who are coming from countries like Sudan, which, although it's out of the papers at the moment, is still in a very, very dangerous, violent conflict at the moment. They're coming in many cases to join family and community members. We have a large and well-established Sudanese diaspora community here. People think that the UK respects human rights. They think that it will be a safe home for them. They often speak English as a first language because we have a colonial history of having been present in those countries. And they really believe that we will offer them safety. I mean, think of the unaccompanied children. Imagine the trust that those children's parents have put in us as British people to protect their children from the danger that they've sent them to escape from. These are people who have trusted us to protect them, to offer them an opportunity to rebuild a life with all the things that we take absolutely for granted every single day. And they deserve for us to live up to that trust and to live up to our reputation as a country that protects human rights. And hopefully this judgment is a step back towards that direction.
Zoe Gardner, many thanks indeed. As always, it's good to know your neighbours are LBC listeners as well. That's making their displeasure felt and indeed almost heard. It's 11:16. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. How do you want to do this then? I mean, I tend not to get calls so much from sort of Farage fans. Here he is. The House of Lords and the judiciary will always do their best to assist illegal immigration. France is a safe country. We should send people straight back there, he says in response to this judgment. Simon Clarke, Tory MP, this is a deeply disappointing rule in the... Why do they hate British judges, these people? This is a deeply disappointing rule in the face of the clear will of Parliament. I would anticipate an immediate appeal to the Supreme Court. We have to be able to control our borders. If the ECHR continues to forestall this, we have to revisit the question of our membership. So do these people not understand what the ruling is, or do they not care? I suspect a combination of both. But the judgment is based upon the fact that Rwanda is not a safe country to send refugees to. And the Supreme Court may come down and say, actually, it is. We've had another look at the evidence, and it is. But I don't know why anybody... So I guess the only people you've got here, I mean, whether it's Simon Clarke or Nigel Farage or any of these other ghouls, what are they actually saying? I don't care if it's not safe. We should send them there anyway. Is that it? I guess it is, but they're not yet prepared to say that out loud. They will, though. They will. 18 minutes after 11. We'll start taking your calls after this. 20 minutes after 11. Why do all the racists hate British judges? 0345 6060 973. I'm kind of joking. What is a slightly more substantive or mature question on this issue? I think we'll go with the old, do they understand? Do they not understand, or do they not care? So let's think more of politicians or public figures who will be preening themselves and composing very outraged tweets that both misrepresent what the European Convention on Human Rights does and where it came from, and completely overlook the fact that the only countries outside its auspices in the whole of Europe are Russia and Belarus, military dictatorships, essentially. So that is the path which these people are being drawn to. But if you take a if you take a Suella Braverman as a starting point, for example, does she not understand the issues here, or does she not care? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. That's the point. So Tim Farron, the former Liberal Democrat leader, makes the point that we've been examining, that this is what they actually want. Let's do that. This is what they actually want. The government will be pleased with the Rwanda judgment because it's a silly, expensive policy that wouldn't work, but now they can blame lefty lawyers rather than take responsibility for it themselves. Either way, patriots and Democrats should not be okay with ministers being above the law. That's why it sits in interesting juxtaposition with the Privileges Committee report this morning, because there's a significant swathe of Tories who are perfectly happy with the Prime Minister being above the law. They think he should be above the scrutiny of parliamentary committees as well. And so does he, which is why he ran away and took his ball with him before the punishment was imposed by Parliament. It is pathetic, but also dangerous. But that is the question, I think. Is this what they want? Is this the plan? Because... it's a complicated question, but let me just have a quick look in Idiot's Corner, if I can, if you don't mind. Here you go. George, he calls himself George the Gooner. He says, if it's safer than their own country, then what harm is there? Well, you go to Rwanda and take your chances then in a country where refugees got shot for complaining about their food not that long ago, George. I mean, that's such a silly thing to say, mate. Actually, I'm going to be kind. I'm not going to put you in Idiot's Corner, because I just think you haven't thought about it. That's a bit like saying, well, if there's only 10 guns pointing at you in that country and there's 100 guns pointing at you in that country, why wouldn't you go to the country where there's 10 guns pointing at you? Come on, mate, we're all better than that. The people who think they like the idea because they don't understand it, how many constituencies are there here? People who think they like the idea because they don't understand it, which we could call that the Ian Duncan Smith contingent. People who think that the only people who are going to be sent to Rwanda, or the only people who are going to have to stay in Rwanda, are the people who don't have a case for asylum in the UK. So the only people that are going to be sent to Rwanda and have to stay there are the people who are not genuine refugees, right? Problem with that is actually all the genuine refugees are going to have to stay there as well. And we know that when applications are finally processed, the numbers hit around the 80% mark are successful. So you've got the people who like the policy because they don't understand it. Then you've got what I think is probably a tiny number of people who like the policy and do understand it. And at the moment, I haven't got anyone. Well, I suppose that has to be the Braverman contingent, doesn't it? Because she must at least know that everyone's going to get sent to Rwanda in her dreams. That is her own phrase. She dreams about sending everyone who has come here in a small boat to Rwanda, even if they're on the Taliban's top 10 public enemies list. So we've got the Ian Duncan Smith contingent. They think they like the policy because they don't understand it. The Braverman contingent, they do understand the policy and they do like it because they want to deport everybody. The more people they can deport, the better. The more deportations, the merrier. I don't think there's anyone else, really. And then you've got people who possibly understand it, who like it. I'm looking only at people who like it. So 1, 2, 3. People like it, but only if the third country is safe. And who are you going to trust to make that decision? Well, good old British justice, actually. Good old British judges. Rule Britannia. So you've got the safe country option as well. Ian Duncan Smith, we like the policy because we don't understand it. Suella Braverman, we like the policy and we do understand it. We love it because it's really cruel. And then number 3, no. The policy could be uncruel if the country's safe. So if the country to which we're sending these poor people is safe, then I am in favour of it. So you've ceased to support it today because the judges have decided that it's not safe for now. Which means there's only those 2 categories left. The Ian Duncan Smith contingent, we like this policy because we don't understand it. And the Suella Braverman's contingent, we like this policy because we do understand how hideous and horrible it is. The point is the hate. The point is the cruelty. 26 minutes after 11. Which leads us to this question. And I don't know the answer to this. Does Suella Braverman want to deport people, or does she want a political football to kick around, which has got lefty lawyers or judges or European Convention of Human Rights written on it? I just want to know what you think, because no one knows for sure, except possibly her, and even that I don't think is absolutely stone cold guaranteed. Not just her, but the cheerleaders for this disgusting policy. Do they actually want the planes to fly to Rwanda? Or do they just want this to become a bigger and more febrile political football? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973. Because I don't know. I don't know if Tim Farron's right, even though I've explored this possibility myself. What do you think they want? To deport people? Genuine refugees? People on the Taliban's hit list? Or to have a largely misunderstood but increasingly enormous political football to kick around the front pages of the Daily Mail and the rest of it? Do they want to deport people, or do they just want to try to reignite the immigration debate because as the general election approaches, they have got literally nothing else? There's only so many times you can ask people whether a woman can have a penis. They've got literally nothing else upon which to campaign in a coming general election except some desperate attempt to revivify, to reignite an immigration debate that in this country has always been built on lies and which has already turned us into the first country in history to impose economic sanctions on itself. So what does she want? Does she want to put people on the Taliban's hit list on a one-way plane to Rwanda, genuinely in her heart, what passes for her heart of hearts? Or is it all about creating another immigration conflagration with Farage there rubbing his thighs and down in Dover with his Fisher-Price binoculars and various Tories standing up in Parliament and doing Enoch Powell tribute acts and the right-wing media writing articles about cultural Marxism and out-of-touch lefties who don't think that people on the Taliban's hit list should be deported to Rwanda, and then all of the nonsense, well, they're not proper refugees anyway and they're all this, that and the other. That's what you do. You process the applications, and if they are, if you like, above board and bona fide, then you welcome them. God, there's a word you never hear in the context of these conversations anymore. Then you welcome them and encourage them to make a new life in this country and to contribute as immigration, as human beings born elsewhere have been doing to our society for pretty much as long as it has existed. So what is going on here? Is it a deep and disgusting desire to deport completely innocent, genuine refugees to the middle of Africa? Or is it just an attempt to get the immigration conflagration burning furiously once again? Because I think the second job, it'd be a lot easier than the first. And it actually involves the lawyers and the judges doing exactly what they've done today. Every time they do the right thing, it gives the politicians a chance to celebrate their deep desire to do the wrong thing. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. What's the number, James? 0345 6060 973. It's 11:29. Thomas Watts has your headlines. 33 minutes after 11 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I told you it was a big, big day for breaking news. There's another report that has dropped in the last few minutes, finding that the majority of undercover police operations in that controversial Met Police unit, which was becoming known, of course, as spy cops. The inquiry has found that they were unjustified. A little bit more on that, no doubt. Before, I forgot it was Thursday. It's Mystery Hour at 12, so we better squeeze that in quick as well. And if you want to contribute to the conversation about Rwanda and the unlawful policy that the government has sought to enact, then do so now. There are a couple of phone lines free. 0345 6060 973. I'm sorry, if you're new to the programme, there's no point ringing in to talk shocking, stupid, silly stuff, all right? That was close, wasn't it, Keith? You could see your little finger there hovering across the dump button, appropriately enough. So don't ring in and say, why don't they stay in the first safe country they reach? Because then Poland would have exploded after the exodus from Ukraine. Or why don't we deport them back to France? Because we have neither the legal right nor the moral justification for doing so. France currently processes more applications per capita than we do. So I know that much of the British media welcomes these absolutely brain-dead positions, and that Parliament and beyond is now full of people parroting these ludicrous, utterly stupid turns of phrase. But I'm afraid this is a little corner of the British media where we're anti-stupid. And so saying things like, why don't we send them back to France, or why don't they all stay in the first safe country they reach, I've given up explaining why that's stupid, because anyone still subscribing to those schools of thought has chosen to be stupid. And if you've chosen to be stupid, there's not a lot I can do to help you. Whether or not this is the sound of somebody stupid, or whether it's the sound of somebody much more sinister than that, too sinister to be stupid, I honestly don't know.
I would love to be here saying, well, claiming victory. I would love to be having a front page of the Telegraph with a plane taking off to Rwanda. That's my dream. That's my dream. It's
when
my
will
obsession.
that happen?
Oh, man, I'm going to have to play that again. And just what I want you to do, just have the why hanging above your head as you listen to our current Home Secretary. Lost her job, of course, briefly for an egregious breach of the ministerial code before Mr. Rishi, professionalism, accountability and integrity, gave it straight back to her. But why would this be anybody's why would it be your dream? I could see why. Look, nobody's comfortable or happy about this, but it is an economic necessity. You could tell that lie, you could make that argument, but I don't think we focused enough upon the emotion here. The weird, I dream of deporting people, and she knows that could include people that were at the top of the Taliban's hit list, the very top. She knows full well. So listen again, listen to the voice, listen to the words, listen to the tone, and just wonder as you listen, why?
I would love to be here saying, well, claiming victory. I would love to be having a front page of the Telegraph with a plane taking off to Rwanda. That's my dream. It's
When
my
will that
obsession.
happen?
David's in Maidstone to steer us to the question of what we think is going on here. David, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello.
To me, it's a definite political football.
Yeah.
Used very successfully by Farage and co. for the Brexit campaign.
Yeah.
Stir the racists up, get everybody on the go. I've got a boat in Dover, as you know, and I'm out in the Channel quite a bit, and I've been looking at things over the last 4 years, what's happening. And I think at the moment, as far as I'm concerned, the numbers crossing aren't anywhere near as high.
I know you've said that in the past. I don't think they could massage it upwards. I just don't see how that would go on.
Suella Braverman, if you check last autumn in Parliament, she gave her figures out of 32,000. That was in October, November of last year, where she had to tell the truth.
Right.
And then all these figures have been reported of 48, 49,000.
44 and a half,
There's been none this week at all, because I've been checking the Border Force boats on AIS, and they haven't been out of Dover or Ramsgate all week. The last 4 days, none at all. A couple of 3 or 4 last week.
But you could still have landed on the beach even without Border Force.
No, none have landed on the beach for 2 years.
I don't want to get distracted by this. That's all. I just want to talk about the politics of it.
It's being beefed up.
All right.
It's being beefed up.
I don't think it has, but you're there and you've got a boat, so I'm not going to have an argument with you. But for the record, I don't think it has. I don't see why they would do that, how.
I'll make a prediction.
Oh, go on then.
That in later in the summer, the figures will have come down and they'll be claiming a big victory for what they've done.
Oh, all right. Well, again, I don't think that they would be able to do that without too many people being involved and one of them blowing the whistle.
We'll see what happens.
Take me back to the politics. Take me back to...
The politics. It riles people up, and a lot of people get very, very upset about this. Why they're worrying about 30 or 40,000 in the Channel, I don't know, when there's 1 million people coming in, we're letting in. It's irrelevant. So why keep on about it all the time? Because it stirs people up and it creates emotive situations. And it's been used very successfully politically in the past.
And get it in the court, and you can paint a target on the judges' backs as well.
Absolutely. And then also, I think it'll be a method of getting us out of the ECHR, I think, as well. That's another thing.
How would that... I mean, I don't think that is pie in the sky by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, they've even talked about it. So Simon Clarke, who is an MP, apparently, he's tweeting about it already. But so would that involve, then, passing British laws that say it's perfectly acceptable to deport people to unsafe countries?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, that...
It's unbelievable. I think
what did you do at work today, Mummy? Oh, I voted for a bill that would make it perfectly legal for the British government to deport people to countries where they're likely to be tortured or killed.
Well, there
it is. Oh, well done, Mummy. Can I have a biscuit?
Yeah,
It's a funny old world, isn't it? Happy sailings, David. Bon voyage. Jonathan's in Acton. Jonathan, what do you reckon?
Morning, James.
Hello, mate.
I'm the son of an immigrant. My dad was fled Hitler's Anschluss of Austria in the war. And all my family came to this country. They all got jobs in the civil service, doctors, lawyers, tried their best to integrate into the country. And I think we have become ultra-right nationalists in this country and gone completely racist. And if you look at the people that they're turning away, this isn't about...
Just so you know, I am going to argue with you when you've finished on this. But carry on.
I feel that the Conservatives have, like you said, this is their last chance saloon to get elected.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to translate the national racism to have a policy that they don't actually want to do. I think they're trying to use it as a deterrent to win votes, not because they actually want to put people on planes. And the reality is that we are very happy to have certain migrants in this country and not others. And I would say the migrants that we don't want are men of a young age who are brown in skin colour. That I think, is the sort of image that they're trying to...
Very deliberately trying to portray. That's why they use the phrase fighting age instead of working age, which is an interesting semantic choice. The reason why I'm going to argue with you is because I don't think it's a national problem. I think we're actually pretty good. Statistically, international comparisons suggest that we are a much warmer, a much more welcoming nation than the rhetoric suggests. But the problem is that the right-wing media and a certain type of right-wing politician have got such a stranglehold on public discourse, and the people to whom they appeal can be the casting vote, as it were, in referendums and general elections, and inevitably, because people like you and me then spend quite a lot of time pushing back against it creates an unrepresentative and a disproportionate idea. I'm quite proud of where we stand internationally on these sort of matters, but the public discourse post Murdoch's purchase of The Sun in 1969 has been absolutely rancid, and people like Farage owe all of their fame and fortune to promoting precisely the sort of filthy attitudes that you're referring to. But I don't want to paint the country in those terms. Do you see what I mean?
I absolutely accept that point, but Germany wasn't a racist country until a minority started having a very loud voice, and Hitler totally changed the national agenda in Germany. Trump was a very insignificant person in American politics and has totally changed how the world sees America. And I think this government, especially Boris Johnson and Braverman and that lot that have decided to pursue this policy, have changed our understanding in the rest of the world, how people view us, and I think is a crying shame. That's not the only problem. The much bigger problem is that people start to think that is what our leaders believe.
No. Do we derive some confidence from the fact that it hasn't? I mean, I suppose it got Brexit over the line, but I feel this conversation is the same as it would have been in 2016. It hasn't got worse, has it, or has it? God, maybe we're all boiling frogs. I mean, we're talking about deporting people on the Taliban hit list to the middle of Africa. Maybe it has got worse.
I think it's absolutely got worse. And
no, I'm
also,
being an idiot.
I think the reason it's got worse is there is not a single economic argument to say we should not have loads and loads of people coming to this country, because we are suffering in part because of that. And the only thing I can put it down to is complete hysteria about, as you say, fighting age brown men coming to this country, taking all.
I suppose what I'm suggesting is it's not working as well as it might have done in the past. But of course, when you're reminded of these words from Suella Braverman, you do perhaps get an idea of how far we've fallen, even in relatively recent times.
I would love to be here claiming victory. I would love to be having a front page of the Telegraph with a plane taking off to Rwanda. That's my dream. It's
when
my
will that
obsession.
happen?
It's incredible, isn't it? Alan's in Manchester. Alan, what would you like to say?
Well, just agreeing with your previous caller, but when you mentioned the Taliban and Afghan, we chartered a plane to get cats and dogs out rather than the people that were sharing bullets with our soldiers in trenches, and this lot. I mean,
something else Johnson lied about, I think, wasn't it? That.
Well, while we're on with Johnson, Afghanistan, what he did say, James, to his constituents was he would personally lie down over the extension, the third runway at Heathrow. He would lie down in front of the bulldozers, and when the vote in Parliament came, he went to Afghanistan for the day.
That's very true. Steer me back. Let me steer you back to what they're up to now. Do they want to put these people on planes? Is that really her dream, or is the real plan to set fire to immigration again?
I think they have they're sort of morphing into English nationalists.
Yeah.
And it is dog whistle politics, and the clock is ticking towards the next general election, and they're desperate to do anything. And the fact is
it going to work though? Because you've got 44,500 people in this category last year, and you've got I forget what the net figure. 600,000, was it? So the gross figure of people making their way here from elsewhere, including, of course, Ukrainians and Hong Kong-born Brits, which would have skewed the figure slightly. But the gross figure, I think, was in excess of 1 million. So they're going to try and fight an election on 44,500 people born elsewhere making their way here out of over 1 million.
Well, they'll get the friends in the press to do it.
Well, they will
James.
do. They will do. But,
the thing is, what annoys me, James, is you've got, I mean, what I was saying to your producer, was we did have the Dublin Agreement.
We did. We didn't use it much, to be fair, but we did have the right to send people back to France, and we voted, Nigel Farage encouraged everyone to vote to come out of that.
Well, I will digress again. Did you mean the man who was on the poster saying 78 million Turks were going to come here when there was no way, because you have to pass 32 criteria to join the EU?
It's never going to happen.
And all that time, they've only ever passed one.
I suppose the nicest thing I can say about that, Alan, is that was by far from his most disgusting poster during that campaign, of course. But there he is today on Twitter already saying, why don't we send them to France? You are the reason why we can't. Literally, Brexit is the reason why we can't, even if we wanted to, which would be questionable given the fact that we already do less in this field internationally than France does. Thank you, Alan. Thank you very much. It's 11:46. It's 10 to 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. So, I mean, there's the appeal to the Supreme Court, which Adam Wagner told us would kick off in autumn and not reach a judgment stage until early next year. Remember, stop the boats, along with inflation and some other stuff, the pledges that Rishi Sunak keeps referring to. That looks highly unlikely to be achieved this year. Then the alternative is, so you've got the appeal to the Supreme Court, after which all they can do to save this policy, unless Rwanda agrees to reform its asylum system, which seems unlikely, although with the amount of money they've already received, you'd think they might at least make the effort if you were minded to support this disgusting policy. So unless Rwanda changes its whole asylum system and then it goes back to court and gets a different result, the appeal could go the other way. It was only 2-1 today. But failing Rwanda reforming its asylum system, or the appeal succeeding, then all they can do is withdraw from the European Convention of Human Rights, which some of the really stupid people are already talking about. But that would involve enshrining in law the principle that it is perfectly okay to deport people to countries where they are likely to be tortured or killed. And we would, apart from Belarus and Russia, be the only European countries prepared to countenance that sort of thing. I don't know. Is this another little turning up of the temperature on the boiling frog? I genuinely don't know whether or not the massed ranks of the Murdoch press and the Daily Mail and the Faragists and then the kind of the nationalists, the ones who think that Germany mucked up twice. Remember that conference, that Nazi conference, all that lot. Would they be able to sell it to the British public? We've got to stop being so snowflakey about torture and state-sanctioned execution. But I don't see any other way. I don't see any other paths opening up before Braverman and Sunak other than abandoning the policy altogether, or escalating it. And escalation would involve, in the event of a failed appeal to the Supreme Court and a refusal from Rwanda or a reluctance from Rwanda to reform its entire asylum system so that it could become a, quote, safe third country, I don't see any other path in front of them except an attempt to detach from the European Convention on Human Rights, which I think, and I'm not a lawyer, I think that would involve us abandoning the pledge not to deport people to unsafe countries. And unsafe generally is taken to mean at risk of torture or execution. 11:53. Christian's in Crystal Palace. What do you think, Christian?
I think it's a Good morning, by the way,
Hello.
James.
Hello,
first time, long time, is that what they say?
Welcome.
I think it's a distraction. I think they want us to all jump up and down about this so that we don't all jump up and down about what's really going on, the state of the country we're living in, the fact that
it's
lots
not
of
either
people
or.
can't buy food.
Yes, I hear you.
Yeah,
I mean, it may be part of the appeal, but it's not the beginning and the end. Listen again to Suella Braverman, because these are not the words of someone lobbing a dead cat into the conversation. These are the words of someone with some pretty sick fantasies.
I would love to be here saying, claiming victory. I would love to be having a front page of the Telegraph with a plane taking off to Rwanda. That's my dream. It's
when will that happen?
So, do you see what I mean?
I do, and if that's her dream, obviously there's something. If that's genuinely her dream, there's something sort of a bit deeper seated going on there with her. But it's that famous cartoon, a couple of years old now, I think, where there's a worker with one cookie,
Yeah.
And there's a
Famous
brown-skinned man with an empty plate, and there's somebody who looks a lot like Murdoch. Yeah, well, yeah, you know what I mean. And it's sort of, you know, look out, mate, watch for that foreigner. He's after your cookie.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I'm interested in the numbers. So out of, say, a gross figure of over 1 million, will 44,500 desperate people, will that be enough to reignite the kind of debates and conversations that we were having in the run-up to Brexit? I'm not sure. I don't know whether it will or not. But that seems to be the plan.
Yeah, it's a lot of... It just starts the discourse again. I know it's not the ideal place to go, but if you look on comment sections on Facebook and you see people... And if you get enough people to believe these things, then, well, we are where we are now. So obviously they do get enough people to believe these things.
You get them to believe outrageous things, and they will, of course, then do outrageous things. I think, Julie's drawn my attention to this, I think Gullis fell into this trap not long ago. I think that withdrawal from the European Convention on Human Rights that jeopardises the Good Friday Agreement, but we know they're not necessarily shy about jeopardising the Good Friday Agreement either. A little bit on the ECHR, because there'll be a lot of ignorance surrounding it, a lot of very deliberate ignorance. It was a UK-led initiative. It was UK lawyers, it was British lawyers that essentially came up with it with the intent of protecting Europe from another war, essentially, or at least from another Holocaust, from another round of atrocities, and from another Second World War. Very much part of Winston Churchill's dream for post-war Europe, and very much a British-led innovation. I think there is a jeopardy involved with the Good Friday Agreement as well, but I'll try and pin that down. 11:56, and it's been like Mystery Hour for 2 hours today, hasn't it? It's the official Mystery Hour next, but first, Richard's in Maidstone. Richard, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. Hope you're well.
Very well. What's on your mind?
There is one massive flaw in Cruella Braverman's plan that no one seems to be addressing.
Go on.
And that is, if someone is deported to Rwanda and their asylum claim is found to be false, or without foundation, then they stay in Rwanda.
Yes. I think so. I don't see what... I mean, it's up to Rwanda probably what happens to them, actually.
Course. Yeah. Yes. But if their claim is found to be good, and they have a right to be in Britain, then they stay in Rwanda.
This is true, yes.
So what is the point in the British government then processing the claim? Because it doesn't make any difference. Which brings me to my second point.
Oh, hang on a minute. Yep, carry on. I just was waiting for my little cogs to catch up with you there before you moved on.
You're with me.
I'm with you.
If our person passes, because as you say, he could be number one on the Afghan hit list. If he passes and he's still staying in Rwanda, can he make his own way back to Britain? And if he does so and racks up at Dover with all his papers...
With a valid asylum claim.
Yes. Can he then stay and say, I've passed. I've got the paper saying I'm welcome and I've funded myself back here. Can he do that? If you talk to George Smith, better known as Ian Duncan Smith, who changed his name because it sounds posh, as you know. He doesn't know what time of day it is on this policy.
I think you may have missed my introduction to this hour, Richard. I did touch on some of these points at the outset, but you're quite right that we're sipping from a similar cup on this. He was taken by surprise, I think, during a live interview on the first bit of your analysis, wasn't he? That you'll stay there even if it's a successful application.
Yes. So what's the point in actually processing their application? Divert the money into doing...
well, your question is rhetorical, actually, because, I think it might be, because, of course, she dreams of deporting you regardless of whether or not you have a valid claim for asylum. And that's the bit they're not quite ready to say out loud. I don't care if you're on the Taliban's hit list. You're going to Rwanda and you're staying there. And in order to get that past the British public, we have to create the myth that all of these people are bogus applicants or lying about what they're fleeing and what they're staying. And I'll tell you what, if we can find one person that is lying, we will use that to pretend that proves all 44,500 are.
I just want to know, can he self-fund his way back? now he has proper accreditation. Can he self-fund it?
What happens if he gets here and says, "Oh, hang on a minute, I have had an asylum application to the United Kingdom passed by the UK Foreign Office or the UK Border Agency"? Richard, that was an absolutely first-class contribution. Thank you. I shall be passing off some of your calculations as my own in the not-too-distant future on both of those fronts. What is the point of it if the successful applicant and the unsuccessful applicant get treated in exactly the same way? What is the point of the application process? Answer: that's not what the policy is designed to address. And then the second one: if my application has been accepted and passed and I'm in Rwanda but I managed to get to Britain, what happens then? There you go. It's almost like Mystery Hour started early, but it didn't. It starts next. The number you need, as always, as we'll just clear the switchboard, is 0345 6060 973.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Mystery Hour with James O'Brien.
It's 3 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Just by way of trivia, and thank you to whoever brought this to my attention, one of the most sort of prestigious former members of the European Commission for Human Rights, indeed its president from 1972 to 1981, was a chap called Sir James Edmund Sandford Fawcett. Have you ever heard of him? Boris Johnson's granddad. It's a funny old world, isn't it? That's a little nugget of information I wasn't previously aware of, so thank you for bringing that to my attention, Tony. Instead, now, we turn our attention to other mysteries, namely the ones that are currently plaguing your existence, the little whats, whys, wheres, wherefores, even the occasional whither that are bubbling away in the back of your brain. You've got a question that you know has an answer, but you're damned if you can find out what that answer is, then ring 0345 6060 973. And ditto if you hear a question to which you know the answer. The number remains the same. My favourite contribution of the week will win a magnificent prize. I want to say that in the way that Lord Percy's has a brooch of purest green. It will win a magnificent prize. What is the prize? The prize is a Mystery Hour board game. Boom, 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 boom. Forgot to do Dory's Watch today. We'll do it in a minute. Don't let me go home without doing Dory's Watch. Mystery Hour board game, which is great fun. Superb bit of kit. You can find out more at mysteryhour.co.uk, and you can find out the full terms and conditions regarding your opportunity to win one within the next 54 minutes at lbc.co.uk. So, let's just start, I think. Ed's in Nottingham. Ed, question or answer?
Question.
Carry on.
So the SPF, obviously the factor rating of protection of sun cream.
Yes.
Is there a meaning beyond the number? Meaning, like, is it 50-something, etc. kind of thing?
Yeah, so it's chicken and egg in a way, isn't it? So is it based on something, or is it literally a scale that exists?
It's literally just
only...
like that's the top rating you can get? Because I know I've not seen higher than like 50 plus, but
yeah,
because obviously you can get 4. What is the actual meaning behind the number?
I used to know a girl. God, I shouldn't really start stories like that on the radio, should you? In this day and age, I used to know a girl who used olive oil.
Wow.
When she was sunbathing.
Crispy.
She was so brown. It was ridiculous. And obviously, if I was lying next to her on a beach, it looked like a piano. It's absolutely ridiculous. Thank you, Ed. We shall find out. What does the SPF mean on a bottle? Does it have a sort of broader scientific reference? Heather is in Cropredy, is it?
Yes.
In Oxfordshire. Question or answer, Heather?
Question, please.
Carry on.
Why don't we have solar panels on our electric cars?
Is this a sensible question, Heather?
Yes.
Well, there's two thoughts that occur to me on this. The first is a little unkind, so I'd ask your forgiveness in advance.
Okay.
Have you granted your forgiveness in advance?
Yes.
Okay. How likely is it that you are the first person to have thought of this, and that all the electric car designers listening to this programme are now kicking themselves for not having thought previously of the wizard wheeze of sticking a solar panel on the roof of every car in the country? Just genuinely, how likely is that?
It's not very likely.
It's not very, no.
But why have they decided not to do it?
Well, that then becomes a question to which the answer is probably quite straightforward, as in it simply wouldn't be efficient. You're not going to get enough energy from a solar panel on a roof to justify both the engineering and the expense.
Well, if a car's sitting out in the sun all day long,
Yeah.
surely that's charging the battery up.
Well, yeah, but how big would the solar panel be?
Big enough to fit on the roof.
Well, that's not very big, is it?
Well, they're quite good these days.
All right, I'm going to get you an answer to your question because I can tell that you've got no truck whatsoever with my polite dismissals. So speaking of polite dismissals, must catch up with what's happening at Lord's. You're on. All right, why don't we put solar panels on cars? Someone's going to make me look stupid in the next 10 minutes, and it will probably involve someone saying, actually, this is a technology that is currently being explored and is likely to be brought to market within the next few years. So it could be brilliant. You could be right. I'm going to stick by my first observation, though, that the chances of you having suddenly ignited a light bulb above the heads of car designers and environmentalists around the world are pretty slim. Thank you, Heather. David is in Leamington Spa. David, question or answer?
It's a question.
Carry on.
Why do long kitchen knives have sharp points? Is it necessary for safety reasons?
What do you mean?
Well,
what would you rather have?
Well, whenever I use a long kitchen knife, I rarely use a sharp point.
How do you open those like a packet of chicken? How do you pierce the plastic?
Well, I can use that with a smaller paring knife. I don't need a 9 or 10-inch knife.
Yeah, but how can you sharpen? As soon as you start sharpening it, eventually you're going to have a point, aren't you?
Yeah, but you don't have to have a sharp point which is capable of committing
stabbing. So this is a safety question. You could have a safer kitchen knives. So you could have like a bread knife, but with a non-serrated edge.
And if you wanted something which is sharper, you have a shorter knife.
I think
which is less capable of.
I like that.
Ending someone's life.
Okay. No, I'm glad that I realised where you were coming at from this before I got too cocky, because it's potentially quite an important question. But I think that you are misremembering the physics of cutting.
Well, I mean, you like a bit of cooking, I'm sure.
I
James.
do, and think about the angle with which you use a pointed knife when you're chopping or when you're cutting. You couldn't do that with a stubbed end, a blunt end. It wouldn't cut through, would it? In the same way.
Well, next time you chop onions, have a think about that.
No, I am, but you'd have to do it horizontally. When I chop onions, I roll the knife.
Absolutely. Do you use the point though?
No, but I can't roll it unless it's got a point. Like a seesaw.
I see. Yeah, but you don't need to have a sharp point to roll it.
Yeah, but it needs to have a point, and it's going to be sharp if the rest of the knife is. As soon as I sharpen the knife, the point will be sharp, and I can't. When you're chopping it like a don, like a TV chef, and you need to roll the knife. It rolls up and down, And
well, it doesn't need an acute angle point, which is capable of penetrating something quite easily. That's what I'm getting to.
Yeah, it may well be that, unlike Heather, there might be someone listening to this going, crikey, I'd never thought of it like that. It just never occurred to me.
Actually,
what?
James, I know the answer to Heather's question.
Don't go there yet. Don't spoil it. Who's going to look silly? Just tell me this. Who's going to look silly, her or me?
Well, I can't really say that.
I like you. I love your diplomacy. It's going to be me. Thank you, David. So why? Yeah, you see what he means. You've got to say a 9-inch knife. It doesn't need to have a sharp point, and if it didn't have a sharp point, it would not lend itself to use as a weapon. It would simply be a kitchen utensil, a kitchen implement. Thank you. Why? Do they have to have that sharp point? 0345 606 0973. Freddie is in Lincoln. Freddie, question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on.
About solar panels on electric cars.
Oh, yes. Interesting.
So, actually, they have put solar panels on a few electric cars.
Really?
So, they have done it before.
Oh.
But the problem is, you'll only get about 7 miles of range out of them a day. So, they usually use them to power, like, the climate control and the infotainment system.
Okay.
But there's 2 problems with them. One, most people keep their cars in a garage, so you're not really going to get any benefit out of having solar panels on the roof.
Yeah.
And 2, if you do crash your car or have an accident, they can be incredibly expensive to replace. So on a lot of cars, especially on the budget end, they don't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So at the moment, it's more of a gimmick on a car. If you go into the car dealership and
Can you think of one that's got one? I think
There's definitely a new car that's just come out with them.
Hyundai. It's Hyundai.
Yeah, I think it's the new. Yeah, I think you're
August
right.
2019. There was I forget how to pronounce it. I've always said Hyundai, but I think there was an advert recently that said you should pronounce it differently. But they released one in August 2019 with solar panels on the roof to help charge the battery. But as you say, that said, it's up to 60% of the power for the car's battery could be supplied if the solar roof was used for 6 hours a day.
I'm not so sure about that one.
Well, it says it on the press release.
Yeah, well...
Who knows? Anyway, so there you go. So I look stupid, not Heather.
Well, yeah, but
that's all right. I can live with it,
use
mate.
to drive a car.
Not yet,
So I
but
feel like
the technology
not
might
maybe in the
improve.
future.
It might improve. What are your qualifications?
Nothing. I just really like cars.
No, and
so
you've got facts on your side.
interest in them,
That's
so.
a perfectly good qualification. Round of applause for Freddie, please. I politely request people to stop sending me pictures of knives. It's making my Twitter account look very questionable. People would be expecting me, I don't know what they'll be expecting me to do, to come out with some sort of gang affiliation shortly. So stop sending me pictures of knives, please. I see that the question that was asked by David is perhaps even more interesting than I allowed. Toby's in Salzburg. Toby, question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on.
To the sunscreen question.
Oh, yes.
The factor printed on every sunscreen is a reference to time. And when it says factor 20, it means you can stay in the sun 20 times longer before being burnt.
20 times longer than when you've got nothing on, no cream on.
Exactly. And obviously you can already spot the flaw because there are various different skin types.
Well, of course.
So it's not a very meaningful reference. But, so the way they made it up is they actually test this on pigs.
I knew you were going to bring pigs into it. I just knew that was... I don't know how I knew that, but I did. Carry on.
Because,
well, hang on, because are you explaining your qualifications now?
No, it's not really a qualification.
No,
I've
but
been
qualifications...
to an animal sanctuary where there was a massive hog.
Yeah, a massive hog?
Hog, yeah, pig.
Yes.
Male pig is a hog, right?
I know.
And it had this horrible burns on its skin, and they explained they saved this hog from a place where they tested sunscreen.
Ooh.
Because the skin of a pig is very similar to that of a human being.
That's
in
correct.
Terms of
as a fan of pork scratchings, I find that knowledge very disturbing.
I agree.
Always have.
Pork scratchings.
I don't. Let's not think about it too much, Toby.
So anyway, qualifications, animal sanctuary in Austria, where this has been explained, and but again, there's a big flaw. Boris Becker has a different skin type to Marcus Rashford.
This is what I mean. Yes, this is very true, and but it's it's the best available measure or way of doing it, and
it's a scale of reference.
Yeah, so there you go. It's a scale of reference, and it's to do with time. I didn't know that. So you're 20 times longer with that one on than with that. So massive round of applause for Ed. So we've kicked off. Also, no, we haven't done the knives. So just the knives question still on the board. It's 12:16.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
18 minutes after 12 is the time. I think there is one mystery that we should probably deal with a little earlier than planned. Just double checking the timings on this. Just bear with me a minute, because I've been doing it for a while now. You'd think I'd be able to remember, wouldn't you? There we go. So, have we got any new production yet, Keith? What? No, nothing at all. So I'm just going to have to shout Doris over the top of Woke Watch then and pretend that's 3 days now, mate. Seriously. What do they do in all those booths with all the people with the deep voices going, Chris Moyles? Well, okay. And now it's time for this week's... No, wait. I'll cue you. I'll give you a visual. All right, ready? Because I'm going to say it's... Yeah. And now it's time for... What do I do? How do I do? Do I say Doris Watch and then do the thing, or is the first time I say Doris Watch when I say it over the top? Is that how we do it? Okay. All right. It's 19 minutes after 12 on Thursday, June the 29th, and now it's time for Doris Watch. It is now 20 days since Nadine Dorries promised to resign as an MP with immediate effect. I repeat, immediate effect. It is 20 days since Nadine Dorries pledged to resign as an MP with, and I quote, immediate effect. Update, Nadine Dorries has not resigned as an MP. And that is the end of today's Dorries. Is that all right? David's in Gurrock in Scotland. David, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
So how do super injunctions work? We hear the term a lot in the media.
I'll tell you now, you hear it a hell of a lot more than they actually exist.
Well, possibly.
No, not possibly. Most definitely. I can tell you that for nothing. But carry on.
So, okay, in theory, a theoretical super injunction stops the media talking about a certain subject.
Yes.
And therefore the person wants to keep it secret. Surely if the court that grants the injunction has to contact every media organisation in Britain
yes.
to say, do not talk about this, it defeats the purpose of keeping it secret.
Well, not really. I mean, you sound a bit like Paul Dacre, which I apologise for saying that, because his content...
No need for that.
I know. I feel awful even as the words came out of my mouth. But I think his argument was in a speech he gave a few years ago that precisely that the changing technology made some of this stuff impossible to properly police or properly impose. It's information that the media is ordered not to report, and of course you can't report the fact that the injunction exists either, which makes it particularly tricky.
How would the literally thousands of media organisations in the UK know?
Oh no, that happens. That's not so difficult to do. I mean, just I don't know what the answer to your question is specifically. Whether it's everybody who there's be a register somewhere, everything that's covered by IPSO or Ofcom or I mean, they do exist. It is doable. There's just nowhere near as many of them as people are sometimes persuaded to believe. So so what you want is the definition of the organisation that would receive news of the super injunction.
Yeah, and I know the golden rule. I'm not allowed to ask two questions, but what would be the punishment?
I don't know.
If you
you'd be in contempt of court, I think. So I mean, you could conceivably be jailed. But so who gets the super injunctions? Really, is the question that we want to answer.
Yeah. Like I say, again, you're absolutely right. I'm probably listening too much to certain elements of the media, but we hear the phrase a lot, and I suddenly thought, well, hold on, how do you if you're a radio manager in Inverness, and you want to talk about something and you talk about it, then you're held in contempt of court, and if it is legal, then the old ignorance of the law is no defence, so you could potentially be charged with something, even though you had no concept. You know what I mean? Like the veil of secrecy should be it defeats itself.
Yeah. No, I understand your question perfectly. I like it. 23 after 12. Thank you, David. That's a good question. Tricky. Because I'm a journalist and I don't know the answer. Where's the list of people who are informed about super injunctions? I get anyone who is likely to report something. But the world has changed, hasn't it? Because that now includes everything. You could have 1 million followers on Twitter. You're a bigger media platform than most newspapers. That's why they hate Twitter so much. But you don't get sent news of super injunctions. Joe's in Warrington. Joe, question or answer?
It's a question.
Carry on.
It's about escalators.
Excellent. I like it already.
I don't know whether you ever noticed, but if you're standing on an escalator and you put your hand on the handrail,
yes.
Sometimes when you go up the escalator, your hand sort of moves forward as if it's out of sync with the step.
Yes.
Just wondered why that happens.
I know this. Just bear with me a minute, will you? Gurrock, not Gurrock, sorry. I'll just clarify that now. Is it, if you've got a big wheel and a little wheel, Joe, and a strap around them, that's not going to be it, is it? Because that's going to go the same. You've got two straps on the same. Yeah, okay. So I want you to imagine a big wheel and a little wheel. Yeah?
Yeah.
And now I want you to imagine a belt tied around both of them, right?
Yeah.
And now I want you to imagine another belt tied around, like with about an inch in between on your diagram in your head.
Yeah.
An inch between the first belt and the second belt, right?
Right.
And now start the wheels turning in your head. Are they turning now?
Vaguely.
So the belt at the bottom that's directly attached to the wheels is going to move at a different speed to the other belt because the other belt's much bigger.
So why is it sometimes they seem to be in sync and sometimes they're not, though?
Because sometimes the wheels are the same size. There are two types of... I'm making this up, but
Right.
I think the physics is working. There are two types of escalator design, or the difference in the size of the wheels is pretty negligible, although one needs to be smaller, therefore you don't really notice it moving ahead of you. Or the length of the escalator, you only really notice it on very big, long escalators because that is when... That's the answer, mate. There it is. That's when you probably notice it at Holborn, but you wouldn't notice it at South Ken.
I noticed it at King's Cross.
Yeah, that's a pretty big one. That's a pretty big...
Not the one from
All right.
the top.
All right, so the last bit
mainline
doesn't work.
stations.
The rest of it works, though. It's the two different sized wheels. So the belt is making a different journey. Do you see it? Can you see my answer? Can you feel my answer?
Sort of.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether you're right. But.
Well, I mean, it's gonna. If it's true, it works. If you know, that's the escalator is a sort of belt, isn't it? And then the top of the belt is longer than the bottom of the belt, so therefore it will travel. Anyway, that's it. I'm not. Do you want the biggest surprise of the day, Joe?
What's that?
I'm not giving myself a round of applause for this.
Strange that,
yeah, I know. I mean, well, mate, some days, depending on my mood, I'd be doing a lap of honour by now. But no, if I turn out to be even close to the truth, I will be delighted. But why does the handrail run away from your feet when you're on an escalator, particularly that one at King's Cross? Thank you, Joe. From Joe to Jack. Jack's in Padstow. Question or answer, Jack?
It's a question, James. It's not an answer to the knife question, which is probably up my alley.
Do you know? Do you know it? Do you know the answer to the knife?
I do, but I'm not. Yeah, I'll let somebody else answer it.
Thank you.
So my question is mirages. Right, we've had a lot of hot weather recently, and I obviously now I'm driving as an adult.
Well done! Congratulations.
Yeah, fifth time I passed the test.
Yeah,
and I don't see mirages anymore. But when I was younger, when I was a child, I saw them all the time in the car. Now, is there a reason?
A mirage? You mean like a full-on hallucination?
Yeah, on the road, like say 100 meters down the road, you'd see like big wet patches, which was just not there.
You just mean that the light, as it were, going weird. You don't mean you'd see, because I think of mirages of people crawling through the desert and thinking that they've stumbled into an all-inclusive resort, and they have that. I mean, that to me is a mirage. It's from Hanna-Barbera cartoons, or you don't mean that. You're not driving down the motorway and you imagine a McDonald's.
No. You see big puddles of water, which I guess in a desert, when you're looking for water, you might imagine that they're oases or whatever. But just down the Cornish roads, I used to see them going to school all the time, and now I don't.
Right.
And is it because I'm driving, or is it because I'm taller? I don't know
what you're talking about.
Well, it's a visual hallucination of hot air. I don't know.
Isn't it? No, it's an optical illusion rather than a mirage. It's not a hallucination. You're seeing. It's something to do with the heat. It only happens in hot weather, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's the light, the heat coming from the road is doing something to the molecules through which you're looking at things, and therefore it has become a distorting lens.
Yeah, but does that happen more?
Why doesn't it happen when you're an adult?
Yeah, and because I'm driving and concentrating on the road all the time, I don't see
This is a mad question. You should have just answered the knife one.
I know. I thought that. The thing is, it came just before I came on.
But we're in now. We're
it's too late. Yeah, it's a bit like that Shakespeare quote. So
which one?
I've given it to you. You know, if you've gone so far, you can't go back.
Oh,
so,
yeah. That's the Scottish play, I think.
Yeah.
All right. So why do you see those miragey things when you're little, but not when you're big?
Yes.
You're on. How's business? Is it all right? It's about to get busy for you now. Going bonkers now, is it?
We need it. We definitely need it. It's been very quiet.
All right. Well, good luck.
Thanks, mate.
Take
Cheers.
care.
Bye.
There you go. Do get to Jack's Restaurants if you ever find yourself down in Padstow. Absolutely splendid establishments. It's coming up to 12:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. So the Mirage stuff, the super injunction-y stuff, the escalator stuff, and the knife stuff. All Human Life is here. Amelia Cox has the headlines.
Mystery Hour with James O'Brien. This is LBC.
No, you just defined a mirage while telling the bloke who'd used the word mirage that he didn't know what he was talking about. I said you just did that. That was not me. It was me. Terry's in Bournemouth. Terry, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on, Terry.
Why do I always end up giving electrical answers?
That's a question, mate. Hang on a minute. That's a question.
No. Sorry.
What have you got?
It just happens every now and again. Subjects come up that I used to work on the escalator at King's Cross when I was an apprentice electrician on British Rail.
Spooky.
And I know, but the reason a belt travels further is because the bit that we don't see underneath the ground surface, there's a whole gearbox mechanism, which also includes cleaning and maintenance access. So you're absolutely right. The belt does go further.
Right.
But it's purely because the way if you think of a gearbox, there's a massive gearbox underneath where the motors are and the drives, and so the belt has to go further round. Also, it's because if you take the measurement from where your feet are on the platform up to the belt, that is effectively a radius. So it is. You're right. It is travelling further. I just thought you might like me to confirm it as an ex.
I did. No. But then we don't understand why it happens on some and not on others.
It would be to do with the gearbox ratios inside.
I don't know what that means.
You probably find that it does, but it's not noticeable. It will be...
Or it's a slip. The clutch is slipping, so they are synchronised, but the handrail can slip, whereas the steps can't.
That might be possible.
So I don't want to use a technical term. I don't want to bamboozle you with science, Terry. But could it be that the slipping clutch mechanism on the interrupted collar interface is playing a part here?
You mean the one that's attached to the Dubry? Yeah, I know.
The Dubry doo-doo.
The one where you go to the stores and ask for a long stand.
No, I don't. I think this is real. I think Jack is I think he's in your old line of work. He says it's the slipping clutch mechanism. No, it's not. I'm not like asking for a jar of elbow grease or a new bubble for my spirit level or something like that. It's the slipping.
If the clutch was slipping, then you wouldn't get the traction to pull the whole carriage along. So,
but you would on the handrail. You just wouldn't on the bottom bit.
Well, they're linked.
I don't know.
So,
no. So I'm kind of right, but then we don't fully know why it doesn't happen on all of them.
All I'd have to do is just take a guess and say that it does, but it's not noticeable.
Yeah, I think you're right.
On a particularly long escalator, like the one coming up from the tube up to King's, it's a massive long escalator.
Yeah, that one. Not the It's the could be tension. Could have a bit to do with the tension.
Well, the tension. No, not really, because then that would imply that it's stretching, and it's not stretching. It all has to travel together. But the actual handrail is on a different drive.
Right.
It's mechanically linked, but it's at a different ratio.
Okay. Well, that might make sense then. That would give you different experiences with different escalators, wouldn't it?
It would do, yeah.
There's a theory from someone who presents something called Secrets of the London Underground that it's done deliberately to keep passengers on their toes, to keep passengers alert. That seems unlikely.
You know, I saw an episode of that. That's a fantastic programme.
Was it good?
There's some old, there's some old war rooms somewhere, and I can't remember where they are.
I can. I've been there.
Have you?
I have. I mean, like the old shelters. There's still some tunnels down there where they've still got the chalk on the wall from the Second World War when they were used as bomb shelters.
No, do you know what?
God, I can't remember where I was.
My mum is 96 years old and she went through that London.
Good grief!
She can still remember it. Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
and who would have thought that so many years later her son would be talking about escalators?
I'll tell you what. If you were conceived down there, Terry, I'll give you a Ray Liotta.
No, I'm not that old. Probably Cornwall, I would imagine.
It's just a round of applause in that case. Right, there you go. 12:38 is the time. I forgot about that. I think I took a microphone down there. I did it for the show. Neil is in Harlesden. Neil, question or answer?
Answer.
Neil Rankin. Neil Rankin in the house. So that was Jack. That was Jack Stein a moment ago.
I don't know why I didn't answer.
So that's two royalty, chef royalty on the programme today. So it's going to be the knife.
One of my best mates as well.
It's going to be the knife question, is it?
Yeah, it is.
Good.
It is.
Let's go.
I mean, I've got quite a lot of knives.
Sure.
So there's two different types of knives generally. There's one like a Japanese chopping knife or a hatchet, which is for chopping down.
Yes.
So you've got a sharp edge running along one side. Or there's a slicing knife, which needs to go to a fine point in order to slice through something.
That's what I was trying to explain. That's what I was trying to explain and failed.
No matter which one it is, if you've got one sharp edge, you're always going to have a point, whether that point is 90 degrees or it's smaller than that.
Yeah.
Because you can't have one side with a sharp edge and not meet at a point.
No. But in terms of, forgive me, stabbing, which was David's kind of motivation for asking the question, you can see what he means. You could stab someone with a knife that you chop down with rather than slicing with, but it would be harder. It would be
Well, I mean, if you're going to meet someone in a dark alley, if they're going to have a hatchet or a stabby knife, I'd be pretty petrified of both of them.
Just a word to anyone who's just tuning in. This isn't like a kind of this isn't an advice show or anything like that. I want to make that absolutely clear. It was a question about knife design, which Neil, as a leading chef, is obviously very well qualified to answer. And that's what I meant about the physics of cutting. So when you're slicing, it has to be a rolling process, which brings naturally to a point.
Or if it's a downward process, but it means you've got to have sharp right the way to the end.
Yeah.
So even a hatchet, which is blunt at one end, and one side is completely blunt and flat and heavy sometimes, so it weighs down.
Of course.
But it'll still have a point, because otherwise it just doesn't have a sharp edge.
Yeah, but it was so. But if you thrust it horizontally into a piece of wood, it wouldn't necessarily stick.
No, but you could, but you'd be pretty stupid to try that.
But if you did it like a chopping action, it would stick.
Yeah, you just got to change your angle. Haven't you?
There it is, like a cleaver, almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Qualifications?
Chef, knife enthusiast, collector, nerd.
I don't know, we might take knife enthusiast out for the podcast. I don't know if that's...
Fine.
Round of applause for Neil. Thank you, mate.
All right, cheers. Thanks, mate.
Well, there you go. Cheers. Daniela is in Radlett. Daniela, question or answer?
Hi, James. It's a question. I'm a very big fan, so it's an honour to be on your show.
It's not an honour, but it's a delight to have you here. Thank you.
Your books are great, your podcast's great, and your show's great, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I have a question about why do we eat popcorn at the cinema? I was at the cinema the other day, and it makes terrible noises. It goes everywhere. And why is it that we crave it when we go into the cinema and it's a thing? Why?
It is a thing. It always has been a thing. I mean, historically... It was cheap and easy, I think, to do, and then it just caught on. So it's become a tradition.
Why not corn or?
It is corn.
I don't know, rice or
rice. Cooking rice is much harder than cooking popcorn.
Or crisps, potatoes are quite.
Well, that's
cheap.
going to be even noisier than popcorn, and also not as cheap as popcorn.
I don't know if it's noisier than popcorn.
Crisps.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
It's not as messy.
No. Well, I'm going to leave it on the board, but I don't think it's oh, wow, yeah, of course kind of answer. I think it's just a sort of, oh, yeah, that makes sense. A way of getting sugar into people, probably during a downturn when they needed to sell something cheap because people couldn't afford chocolate or sweets, and then it just caught on. The profit margin, Daniela, on popcorn is absolutely off the charts. It is.
What is it, do you know?
The profit margin, it costs about 2p to make a giant tub of popcorn.
Oh, I see.
And you pay what, $5.95 for it these days?
If you're lucky.
Probably more. What did you see, by the way? What was the film?
It was, I can't remember.
Well, it's not very memorable. I hope the director's not listening. Not that he'd know,
No.
or she would know. I want to see Indiana Jones, but I've got this flipping book to write, so I'm going to have to wait. Anyway, I will put that on the board. Why popcorn at the cinema? You're right. It's not by far the most obvious snack, is it? There's so many things you can. I mean, fruit jellies really would be the best. Fruit jellies in
ice cream, you just lick it.
You do, something that is not. Someone behind me when I went to see. I've forgotten as well now. It's contagious. This. It's what. I hope the director's not listening. Someone was sitting behind me. What's that? It's a big one. What's the big one lately? Fast and Furious. I went to see the new Fast and Furious. A fella sitting behind me, and he was on a date. The noises he was making, Daniela, were absolutely off the charts. And he was almost as if he got a handful of popcorn, and instead of putting it into his mouth piece by piece, he was sort of inhaling several pieces at a time. Well, sitting next to
him?
I didn't shush him. No, I don't. I'm not a shusher. It's not just a shush. If people are talking, I might shush them. But if you're essentially picking up on someone's eating manners, I think you're straying into much more tricky territory than if you're just asking them to stop talking.
Okay.
But anyway, there it is. You're on. Why popcorn in cinemas? It's a lovely question. What about those mirages that young Jack saw, but old Jack doesn't? Who gets told about super injunctions? How do you know whether you're going to make the list? That's all I've got left now. Is there anything else? I don't think there is. Let's squeeze in James, who's in Stafford. James, question or answer?
It's a question.
Carry on.
Right, so I'm a little bit nervous. First time caller, so bear with me.
Of course.
If you give a dog everything it needs, so it has food every day, it has fresh water, big garden, gets walks, why would it ever run away? Because it goes against all sort of instinct of survival.
Well, they don't really run away, do they?
Yeah, I've had dogs run away. Some of them. I mean,
how many? How many dogs?
I think it's fairly common that a dog runs away. Everyone knows not to leave the front door open with
Oh, I see what you mean. Right. Sorry.
Because obviously they still have instincts now from thousands of years ago, like burying bones in case they ever run out of food. So why would they run away from like food, water, everything they know is going to be there to survive?
Because I don't know that they're thinking that far ahead in terms of security, and they're fascinated by smells, so they're running away to get some lovely. I think you need to think of smells like drugs or drinks. They love it. You know when a dog really gets its nose into something, they're quivering with joy, aren't they?
Yeah.
Why are you making that noise?
Yeah.
There's something. It's just like it's going. Wow! Whoa! I can smell something amazing. And then it starts sniffing here and sniffing there, and the dog's done a wee, and that smells incredible. Wow! That's what's going on in the dog's head, mate. It's not going. Got my food, got my snap, got my water, sticking around, taking it easy. That's what dogs do.
It overrides their instinct. I mean, I don't think...
It is their instinct. Their instinct is, what? Wow, whoa, wow, smell. That's the instinct. The instinct is not, hey, got my food, got my water, taking it easy. You're misrepresenting dogs, James.
No.
Oh, yeah, you are.
No, because they will have... Even if they can find smells, just through pure excitement, they are completely deserting their base. They don't know if they can.
But not consciously. They think they'll be able to find their way back. They don't. They get lost. They don't just sort of rush off. They're led by their nose. That's where the phrase comes from. I think it is now. So they're led by their nose out of the front door, and then they get so caught up and excited by all the smells that they drift too far to be able to find their way back home easily.
Yeah, but then if they were that good at smelling that they'd run out their front door, then obviously they'd be able to find a way back.
Not necessarily, no, because it's too many smells. Too many smells all over the place. Also, they get quite far. I'll put it on the board. I mean, it's a weird question. Because you're thinking that they're making a human calculation. You've fallen into a trap of anthropomorphism.
Yeah.
So they're not. Because what you're thinking is, I'd never run away if someone was feeding me, tickling my tummy every night in front of the telly, but never want for anything. I'd never leave the house. That's what you're thinking, James, because you're fundamentally quite lazy. But the dog, but the dog is not. The dog is a very different evolutionary consequence. It's driven by curiosity and by smell and by excitement. He's not thinking, "God, I got it good here. I'm never going out again. I've got it good. Change the channel. Let's watch the Equalizer." That's what you're doing. But the dog is not. I shall put it on the board. We'll see if you get an answer. All right. All right. Thank you. 12:48 is the time.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
12:51 is the time. Why do dogs run away when they've got all mod cons at home? Why does popcorn go hand in hand with cinemas? Why do children see mirages? Why did little Jack see mirages when he was driving around Cornwall, but Big Jack doesn't? And who gets super injunctions? Who gets to see them? Who gets told about them? 12:51 is the time. Ryan is in Wolverhampton. Ryan, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
It's about escalators. I think Terry is a little bit wrong.
Escalators, yeah, go on.
Yeah. So basically, both the escalator handrails have a wheel underneath which drives the handrail, and that, in theory, the handrail should run exactly the same speed as the steps to stop people from slipping forward,
pulling themselves over,
backwards.
or pulling themselves over, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes you might notice when you're holding onto a handrail, it'll slip backwards.
Yeah.
That's because there's not enough pressure applied to it.
Tension.
Yeah, tension, exactly.
I flipping knew it. I said that.
Yeah, so if it's going too fast, there's probably too much tension on it. But it's more common for them to slip back, which means there's not enough pressure applied. There's there's a bank of rollers that push the handrail against this wheel, and if it's not tight enough against the wheel, then there'll not be enough pressure on it, so it'll slip backwards basically.
So yeah, okay. So it's the tightness. And hang on. So is it on the same wheel as the bottom bit, the bit that your feet are on?
The steps. So the steps run off a sprocket connected to the motor.
Yeah.
And then there's a chain between the sprocket of the steps and the handrail drive.
Exactly what I said. This is exactly.
Yeah,
did you hear my original answer? Before.
I did, yeah.
I was flipping right, wasn't I?
Sort of.
With that thing I did, I drew a picture in everyone's mind of two sprockets. I called them wheels instead of sprocket. Hang on. So it's got nothing to do with the size of the sprockets, has it?
No.
I got that bit. I got that bit. I got wrong, but the rest of it
was slightly wrong. But the rest of it, you wasn't too bad, yeah.
Qualifications, Ryan?
Escalator engineer.
Are you at work now?
I am, yeah.
Where?
Stoke-on-Trent.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In the cinema.
Oh, no, in a cinema in Stoke-on-Trent? Because I saw that. I knew you were in a cinema because the producer put it on the screen. I thought you might be at Merry Hill. I didn't realise that you travelled so far and wide. I thought you'd be local. I thought you might be down at Merry Hill. But anyway, it's got you a round of applause. Great work.
Yeah, cheers. Thank you.
Can you slide in and see a movie before you go home, or would the boss find out?
I'm going to Abbot this afternoon, so probably not.
It's all go. Thank you, Ryan. Richard is in Tunbridge Wells. Richard, question or answer?
Answer about popcorn, James.
Carry on.
You have to think popcorn predates cinema.
Yes, of course.
It goes back to the travelling circuses and carnivals in America, way before cinema existed.
Yeah.
And as you pointed out, it's very profitable.
Yes.
In terms of what you can charge for it, but also it's very transportable.
When it's tiny.
Yeah, when it's tiny, and also it doesn't go off.
No, cool. Yeah. There's all sorts of reasons why it'd be a good thing to. So it kind of wakes its way into the notion of entertainment, and then I think it was during the Great Depression it got picked up by cinemas for the other reasons, because it was so cheap and portable and imperishable.
Compared to potato chips, like I think it was you or the cola.
Yeah.
Potatoes will go off. They're heavy to transport. You need oil to make it.
Yeah.
All you need for popcorn is a heat source.
That's right.
And that's it.
Do you want to know something crazy? You're right. And you go, what are your qualifications?
I used to date a girl who worked in a circus. And she told me the
I
story.
said, what are your qualifications?
No, that's the only qualification I have, I'm afraid, for this particular question.
No, it's fine. It'll get you a round of applause. But I'm going to tell you something that I don't know whether you're aware of this or not, but they don't do them on site anymore. So the portability...
No, I've seen it. It's giant bags.
Have you seen it? Because I'm in Leicester Square, and every now and then, right, first thing in the morning, there'll be a lorry parked outside, and they'll throw open the doors, and there are these... It's impossible to convey how enormous they are. These like tubes.
They're like beanbags.
They're bigger than beanbags. They're just giant, huge. Yes, like giant beanbags full of popcorn, and they carry them into the cinema. It's a very odd. I mean, it must be the economic way of doing it, mustn't it? Because otherwise,
and then they still put them in the machines to make it look like it's just being popped.
Exactly that. Well, to heat them up as well a bit, so they're going to be a little bit
warm them up.
Yeah, to warm them up as well. But it is one of the strangest things because all the laws of economics and physics, you would have thought, surely you transport the kernels and heat them up on the site, but then they throw open the back of the lorry and there are these absolute mountainous tubes, plastic tubes full of popcorn. It's crazy. Anyway.
Late-stage capitalism, James.
It is late-stage capitalism. It's got you a round of applause.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Dave is in Stamford-le-Hope. Dave, question or answer?
It's an answer for you, James.
Carry on, mate.
It's the Mirage question.
Yes.
The answer, there's a twofold answer to this. So, firstly, mirages occur when you've got the heat on the road surface, which is then heating the air around it, which causes light to bend. So, therefore, it creates like a mirror effect. So that will create the mirage itself.
Got it.
In terms of a child seeing it, but not necessarily as an adult, I would think it's got something to do with the brain's capacity and sort of the natural survival instinct to look for danger and threats. So a child in a car is not looking around it for threats and stuff like that, whereas a driver or passenger likely is. So therefore they're distracted.
So especially a driver. A driver's levels of concentration are going to be way higher, aren't they?
Yeah, it's all to do with cognitive distortions.
I think you're right. Qualifications? I like that answer.
Mental health support worker and former teacher.
Well, that's more CV than qualifications. How is that? Where did you get the information that you've just shared?
So with the mental health work that I've been doing, I use cognitive distortions as a way into talking about things like anxiety and stress and all that sort of stuff. So, and I draw the kind of distinction between a cognitive distortion and mirage as a way to get people to kind of come on board with it.
Oh, brilliant. Perfect answer. Round of applause for Dave. Thank you, mate.
Thank you very much,
Lovely
James.
stuff. Lovely stuff. Important work you're doing. I wish there were more of you. 12:57 is the time. Last one. Alan's in Faversham. Question or answer, Alan?
Answer.
Carry on.
It's the dog question.
Yes.
The wording of the question was slightly wrong because the dogs don't run away. They're not running away from something. They're running for something.
Oh, you're good. That's it. That's it. There it is. They're running to somewhere.
Yeah, and also he kind of answered his own question because he said, "Oh, you give them everything, but you don't leave the door open."
Yeah.
So the one thing you haven't given them is the freedom to wander off whenever they want to.
That's exactly. But would they wander back if you did give them that freedom? Not necessarily.
Well, their intention would be to wander back, providing they didn't get lost.
No, they would. Qualifications?
I run a doggy daycare service.
Oh, beautifully done. How's business?
It's very good, actually.
Very glad to hear it.
Especially since people do hybrid working, they're all getting dogs.
Of course. Have a round of applause.
Lovely, thank you.
No, thank you. It was a good one, that. Did we miss anything off? Mirages? Just the super injunctions, but then we're not allowed to talk about them. Boom! If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Globe. We need a winner. It's quite tricky this week. Dogs. I'm going to give it to Joe. No, what's the fella fixing the escalators? The second one, the one who's on his way to Aberystwyth, Ryan in Wolverhampton. I'm going to give it to Ryan in Wolverhampton because his accent makes me homesick. Is that bad? Is that bad? I think that's reasonable. Ryan, congratulations, mate. You're getting a brand new Mystery Hour board game making its way to Wolverhampton at the first opportunity. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also rewind live radio. All LBC's shows are there, as well as the world's biggest podcast. Lovely full disclosure this week with Wendell Pearson. A really, really lovely one coming out on Friday with Rob Rinder. So rewind live radio on Global Player. Download for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. I'll see you later if you're coming to the O2 this evening for the State of London debate. Otherwise, Tom Swarbrick will be with you at 4 and Sheila Fogarty is with you now. The 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 Fogarty is with you now. The